Chapter 323. No matter how outstanding a person is, once something involves their wife and children, they will lose their usual indifference and wisdom. Just like Watergate, in the Hokage's office, how many people's lives are affected by a stroke of his pen? On the battlefield, he is invincible, rarely meeting an opponent, and is feared by many people. But when Naruto's situation has a problem, even Nangongja, who is not so close to him, can lower his status to ask for help. It is really emotional. After Nangongja left Watergate's office, he went straight to Watergate's house. The one who opened the door for Nangongja was naturally Watergate's wife, Shina Kushina. Seeing Nangongja, Shina Kushina immediately understood the purpose of Nangongja's visit. With a somewhat sad face, Shina Kushina took Nangongja to Naruto's room on the second floor, and gently opened the door. Although the sky is a bit dark, Nangongja can still see Naruto sitting on the ground, holding his knees at the moment, and in front of Naruto, there is a group photo of Team 7. Naruto's eyes are a bit dull, obviously his mental state is not so good. Even with the strong physique brought by the Nine Tails chakra, Naruto still looks very tired, obviously he hasn't had a good rest for a long time. No wonder Shina Kushina and Watergate are so worried, and even called Nangongja. Nangongja gave Shina Kushina a look, indicating for Shina Kushina to leave for a while, then he opened the door and walked into Naruto's room. Nangongja deliberately pushed the door and walked, making an extremely easy to detect sound, but Naruto still didn't respond. Seeing that Naruto didn't respond at all, and didn't even say a word, Nangongja opened his mouth to talk to Naruto first. But Naruto beat him to it. "Uncle Nangong, did you let Sasuke go?" Naruto's voice was a little trembling and hoarse, obviously because of his emotional fluctuations, and he hasn't drunk water for a while. Nangongja could imagine Naruto's feeling of being betrayed by someone close to him when Sasuke said that he supported Naruto's decision to leave the Wood Leaf. When Naruto was very young, Nangongja accompanied Naruto. In that childhood without fatherly love, Nangongja undoubtedly occupied part of Naruto's father role to a certain extent. So, Sasuke's departure, his concealment, and acquiescence actually caused the most damage to Naruto. I won't make a decision for anyone, whether it's you or Sasuke. I just analyzed Sasuke's situation when he left the Wood Leaf and stayed in the Wood Leaf. And I believe that even without my opinion, Sasuke would still leave. After all, Sasuke has always been like this, extremely opinionated, especially when it comes to his own growth. So, I just respected Sasuke's decision. Nangongja was very casual about his own opinion and his role in Sasuke's departure from the Wood Leaf matter, but Naruto was caught in his own strange circle, and said to Nangongja, "Even so, uncle, you still played a role in promoting him, didn't you? The three of us have experienced so much together, and we grew so smoothly and significantly when we were in the same team. Why did Sasuke have to leave the Wood Leaf?" He even didn't hesitate to throw himself into the hands of that madman Orochimaru. Things like strength, as long as you diligently practice, you can always improve, right? I also learned a ninjutsu called Rasengan from my father during this period of time, just to catch up with Sasuke's pace. Isn't this the way to endure? Compete with each other, promote each other, and then grow together. In the end, Naruto's voice was almost a roar, but it was deliberately covered up and became more low. But such a low roar had a deafening feeling, and it made people feel like their heart was being oppressed. Looking carefully at Naruto's eyes, Nangongja quickly found that there was some orange color in them. Shina Kushina, who was waiting downstairs for Nangongja, also quickly felt the Nine Tails chakra, and the chakra on her body was also ready. Once Naruto showed signs of going berserk, she would immediately use the Uzumaki's ninjutsu to seal her child's movements. But Shina Kushina's eyes were full of worry and sadness when she looked at me. If it wasn't for the fact that she had no other choice, Shina Kushina wouldn't be willing to treat her child like this. But Shina Kushina was clear about Nine Tails' ability. If there really was an accident, she must control her child. Naruto. Although Naruto's state was not very good, Nangongja still calmly continued to speak to Naruto. You are not the god of this world, you can't arrange the trajectory of other people's lives. Sasuke has the obligation to be responsible for his own life, you don't need to worry about him. No matter how good your relationship with him is, no matter how much you understand each other, you are not him in the end. You won't understand his pain, and he won't understand your experience. What you can do is to live your own life and leave the right for others to choose. Nangongja said, and slowly pressed his hand on Naruto's shoulder, and a strand of internal energy began to pour into Naruto's body. To a certain extent, internal energy has a certain restraining effect on chakra. When Nangongja slowly injected his internal energy into Naruto's body, the surging chakra in Naruto's body also slowly calmed down. Although Shina Kushina downstairs was also a little confused, it was obvious that Nine-Tails' chakra's aura had indeed disappeared, so she also calmed down the chakra in her body and waited for Nangongja's result. Naruto fell into a special state at this moment. At this moment, in Naruto's vision and perception, his room was no longer there, and Nangongja, who was pressing on his shoulder, was no longer there. At this moment, he seemed to be standing at the place where he and Sasuke fought before, the Valley of the Final with some colors of destiny. Sasuke had turned into the humanoid state of Curse Seal too, and his body was also wrapped in Nine-Tails chakra to form a pair of Nikkang. He and Sasuke looked at each other across the waterfall. Chapter 324. Looking at Sasuke standing opposite him, Naruto didn't know what to say for a while. And in a trance, Sasuke, who was originally looking at him across the waterfall, suddenly appeared in front of him. The distance between the two was not even more than 1 meter. Naruto, seeing that Naruto didn't speak, Sasuke called out Naruto's name first. And Naruto was also stunned, because Naruto knew that everything in front of him now was not real. But the Sasuke in front of him looked so real that he couldn't figure it out. You. Naruto looked at Sasuke, but still decided to say something in his heart, regardless of whether the Sasuke in front of him was real or fake. Sasuke, I'm a very stupid guy, I don't know if you are real or fake in front of me now. In fact, I didn't like you very much, because compared to me, you were so dazzling. Everyone was overshadowed by your brilliance, excellent grades, handsome appearance, and learned a particularly powerful swordsmanship from Uncle Nangong. Whether it was the teacher or the students, they were so envious of you, and they were so jealous of you. They all have the same name for you, genius. When a person without talent sees an outstanding person, that kind of mentality of jealousy will inevitably emerge. At first, I couldn't see the emotions in my heart, but now I do understand that the name of those emotions is jealousy. But you were envied by so many people, and you were envied by so many people. But I didn't find a trace of happiness in you at all. Every day, you had a cold face, and you didn't seem to be so interested in everything. But sometimes, you would fall into an inexplicable state of contemplation. At that time, your eyes would be filled with pain. You would be like a severely injured beast, rejecting everyone who came close to you and unwilling to get close to anyone else. That was a kind of, how to say it? Deep loneliness. Later, we were assigned to a team. In Team 7, we were almost together day and night. Slowly, I found that you were not so annoying. You were also a person who was willing to be injured in order to protect your teammates. When you saw a strong opponent, you would be excited to tremble. In the battles and days of getting along with each other, I slowly regarded you as my partner, my best friend. But, you still left. Even if I said that I would break your hands and feet to bring you back, even if I used the combination of Nine-Tails chakra and Rasengan that I couldn't fully control, I still couldn't bring you back to Woodleaf. Uncle Nangong said that all of this was your choice, I was not qualified to make their decisions for anyone. I know that Uncle Nangong was right, but I was still very unwilling. My closest friend, my closest companion suddenly left me without giving me any reason to convince me, I really can't accept it. When the words came out of his mouth, Naruto also felt that his state had changed. His body, which was originally wearing pajamas, had now changed into his usual battle clothes. Violent and endless Nine Tails chakra burst out from his body, and a Rasengan filled with Nine Tails chakra and Wind Attribute chakra appeared on his right hand. Just like the scene when he fought with Sasuke in the final valley. And Sasuke, who just stood opposite him and just said a sentence, was now staring at Naruto with his eyes. His originally pitch-black eyes have turned into the strongest state of the three-tomo Sharingan, the three-tomo Sharingan. You ask me the reason? Sasuke looked at Naruto, his voice was a little gloomy and hoarse, he seemed to be trying to restrain his emotions. My reason is very simple, because wood leaf is no longer suitable for me. Although there is a comfortable life and companions like you in wood leaf, these are not what I pursue. In the beginning, I always hoped that I could become strong enough to find out the truth of everything, enough to recover the things I lost. But gradually, I did find out that these are the reasons I found for myself. I'm not a person who is particularly obsessed with these things. In my heart, I'm so simple and eager for power. I'm eager to have something in my hands, no longer a marionette in the hands of others, no longer a chess piece in the hands of others that can be discarded at any time. This kind of mood made me willing to abandon my companions, and made me willing to run to Orochimaru's hands to take risks. Because I'm fed up with my own powerlessness, I'm fed up with someone always standing on top of my head and controlling me. I want to change, I want to become that hand. Sasuke said, and the look of suppression disappeared. Originally Scarlet Sharingan, at this moment, the white part of the eye was covered with blood. That look was enough to see the madness in Sasuke's heart. And Naruto seemed to be frightened by the appearance of Sasuke in front of him. The distorted face and the deformed body because of the second state of the curse seal made Sasuke look like a devil who climbed out of hell and wanted to overthrow everything and rebuild everything. Gradually, Naruto only felt that his eyes were blurred for a while, and everything in Naruto's eyes began to become illusory, until finally his consciousness fell into a deep pool, and a strong fatigue attacked his brain. On the first floor of Watergate's house, Shina Kushina and Nangongja sat on the sofa. A cup of hot tea and a few dishes of snacks were placed in front of Nangongja and Shina Kushina. Obviously, Shina Kushina took them out to entertain Nangongja. Naruto, is he okay? Shina Kushina asked Nangongja with some apprehension. Obviously, she had endured for a long time before asking this question to Naruto. Don't worry. Nangongja smiled, which also made Shina Kushina's mood slightly relaxed. The reason why Naruto is in such a bad state this time is indeed because of Sasuke's sudden departure from the village. On the other hand, it's also because before this, he used the Nine Tails chakra, which was beyond his control, on me. Although the chakra that was mobilized by Naruto has returned to the Nine Tails body, there are still some remnants that affect Naruto's mood. I suppressed the residual chakra in Naruto's body with my own internal strength, and used a little hypnosis technique to push Naruto into a deep sleep. According to my inference, Naruto will wake up tomorrow morning, and there won't be any impact. You can rest assured. Chapter 325. In the forest outside Wood Leaf, it was still so quiet. But today's silence was a bit too much, there wasn't even the sound of birds or insects. It was like the autumn wind had swept through this huge forest at this moment, returning everything to its most primitive state. But in the dark corner of the forest, it was very lively at this moment. A shadow passed by, and Watergate and Nangongja stood a little farther away from this noisy place. After the incident of the Uchiha clan, 3 generations, he ordered the elimination of Root and the removal of Danzo from the position of Hokage's assistant. However, it was only a nominal disbandment. Root would use extremely cruel brainwashing methods on their own people, so their cohesion had reached an inhuman level. Today, we have found most of Root's bases in Wood Leaf, but there must be some Root members left in the outside world. It's really pitiful for these people who were persecuted by Root. It wasn't until today that I have enough strength to eliminate Root. Watergate looked at the large forest in front of him with some pity. under this forest is the largest base of root in Woodleaf. Since he has decided to eliminate root, Watergate is naturally prepared. No matter the size of Woodleaf's base, as long as it is root's base, ninjas loyal to Watergate are gathering. As long as the appointed time is reached, these people will directly enter root's base. The number of jonin participating in this operation is very large. The 3 clan heads of Inoshikacho are all present. Hatake Kakashi and Mike Guy are also participating in this operation. Kurenai, Yuan Fei, Asuma, and other jonin loyal to Watergate, as well as the Umbu under Watergate's direct command, are already outside the other bases at this moment, waiting for the opportunity to attack. This war, Root will not be able to escape. Looking at Watergate's compassionate look, Nangongja didn't think that Watergate is so noble. From Watergate's words, it is enough to prove that Root's actions are actually clear to Woodleaf's higher-ups. But over the years, Root has never been eliminated, and even became stronger. Why? The reason is that although Root's actions are very ruthless, they still bring enough benefits to Woodleaf. Many things that are not suitable for Woodleaf to do are solved by Root. Some people who need to be killed but don't know who killed them, some experiments involving human relations, a lot of such shady tasks are carried out by Root. Therefore, Woodleaf's higher-ups are reluctant to directly eliminate Root. Even if the Hokage gave the order, the people under him didn't do anything, so that Root was almost unaffected, and even buried deeper in the ground. This time, if it wasn't for Watergate and Narashikaku's eloquence to persuade most of Woodleaf's higher-ups, this operation is very likely to be unfinished. For the group of people in charge of Woodleaf, you can use the power in your hands to seize benefits for yourself, accumulate wealth, and even do more things that are unacceptable to ordinary people. But the premise of all this is to ensure the interests of Woodleaf. The damage caused by Orochimaru's invasion is obvious to all. Although the Sand took the initiative to surrender and recovered some losses for Woodleaf, the Land of Wind itself is a remote place. How much can they compensate? More importantly, Woodleaf was invaded at such a time, which made Woodleaf's strength decline in the eyes of many clients. This could be seen from the obvious drop in the commission rate during this period of time. These things naturally have to push out a person to take the blame. Orochimaru alone is not enough, so Danzo was logically abandoned. Boom! Hundreds of meters in front of Watergate and Nangongja, a huge explosion sounded. The sky was filled with huge gray and orange flames. This is the phenomenon when the barrier is forcibly broken, and it is also the attack signal agreed by many ninjas attacking Root. Kill! 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 In all the hidden places of Woodleaf, at this moment, there were shouts of killing. At this moment, it was already late at night. Who knows how many people who were sleeping were suddenly awakened by the sudden appearance of a huge explosion and the shouts of killing around Woodleaf. In front of Nangongja, Woodleaf ninjas and Root ninjas were fighting fiercely. Root's level of brainwashing and teaching is really good. But even so, a Root ninja can block 2 Woodleaf ninjas, but can he block the pincer attack of 3 Woodleaf ninjas? Root, after all, is a secret organization, and after the 3 generations issued the order to ban Root, Root also lost its righteous name. Although there are some new members joining over the years, they still can't keep up with the high death rate and disability rate of Root. Root is indeed in a state of lack of manpower, and its strength is weak. Watergate can be said to have chosen a good time to attack Root. Nangongja looked at the battlefield in front of him, and for a moment, he remembered his state of mind during the Shinobi World War. The blood that had cooled down a little because of taking charge of Blood Cloth Pavilion and hibernating in Woodleaf Village was now ignited again. How many years has it been since Nangongja had a good fight? Even during the previous Woodleaf collapse plan, Nangongja gave most of the fighting to others. Even the battle with Ichibi Shikaku was mostly led by Li Yang. The reason was that Nangongja felt that there was no need for him to fight, but at this moment, Nangongja was fighting against his enemy, Root. In the end, Nangongja is actually a guy who holds grudges, and all kinds of bad relationships with Root made Nangongja unable to bear it anymore. With one hand on the hilt of his sword, Nangongzhi jumped and joined the battlefield. Most of the ninjas who are loyal to Watergate on the battlefield are veteran jonin, so they are naturally interested in Nangongzhi, the Yama, who shone in the Shinobi World War. Over the years, Nangongzhi hasn't fought in public, and everyone is very curious about Nangongzhi's strength, so they all paid attention to Nangongzhi's fight. Even Watergate is watching Nangongzhi closely, hoping to see how strong Nangongzhi is. After all, Nangongzhi doesn't practice chakra, and his main attack method is his own exquisite swordsmanship. Only by seeing it with one's own eyes can you see some of the mysteries. Chapter 326. When Nangongzhi jumped into the battlefield, there wasn't any sword energy as usual. Instead, it was very calm, like a drop of water in a lake. Even the ripples were difficult to detect. Nangongzhi was no longer as arrogant and domineering as before. He simply held his heavenly calamity sword and walked through the battlefield as if he was taking a stroll. But even so, no one could overlook Nangongzhi's slightly skinny figure. Because, this person was the person who had been given the title of Yama back then. Such a title was naturally accumulated through the accumulation of human lives. Such a person can't be ignored at will even if he doesn't show his strength. Finally, Nangongzhi slowly walked to the center of the battlefield. Looking around, Root Shinobi and Konoha Shinobi were fighting each other everywhere. But as Nangongzhi gradually walked to the center of the battlefield, Root ninjas and Wood Leaf ninjas spontaneously began to slowly withdraw from the battle at this moment. Wood Leaf ninjas gradually stood behind Nangongzhi, and Root ninjas naturally stood opposite Nangongzhi. You all come together. Nangongzhi didn't feel any tension because he was facing countless Root ninjas. He just said to the many ninjas on the opposite side. Root ninjas are naturally not emotional people, but Wood Leaf ninjas heard Nangongzhi's words and naturally respected Nangongzhi's decision. They all took half a step back and clenched their weapons, ready to support at any time. Looking at their companions, the Root ninjas also made up their minds. Facing a single target like Nangongzhi, it's not advisable to just use ninjutsu to attack, because it can be easily dodged, and it will consume a lot of chakra. The loss is not worth it. Most of the Root ninjas facing Nangongzhi casually pulled out their weapons and rushed towards Nangongzhi. Of course, some Root ninjas quietly hid their bodies, ready to kill Nangongzhi at any time when Nangongzhi didn't have time to react. Most ninjas are good at surprise attacks, and speed is naturally an important factor in a surprise attack. Every Root ninja that was rushing towards Nangongzhi was trying their best to increase their speed, leaving afterimages in the air due to their high-speed movement. Nangongzhi's sword-like eyebrows slightly raised, the tribulation sword in his hand was also pulled out of the scabbard by Nangongzhi. The sound of the blade and scabbard rubbing against each other was very clear, like a dragon's roar, echoing on the battlefield. Ha! With a soft shout, Nangongzhi swung his sword towards the Root ninja rushing towards him. The speed of the blade was faster than the speed of the Root ninja, and in the blink of an eye, Nangongzhi's tribulation sword was already on the body of the Root ninja in front of him. A huge wound extended from the left shoulder to the right waist of the Root ninja, blood staining the Root ninja's clothes red, as if he was wearing a kasaya. Nangongzhi's move was the most basic kasaya chop. When Nangongzhi first started practicing swordsmanship, he focused on the subtlety and flexibility of swordsmanship. Every day, Nangongzhi tried his best to make his swordsmanship more complex and unpredictable, so he practiced hard day after day, constantly learning various swordsmanship to increase the number of swordsmanship he knew. At that time, the Shinobi World War also provided Nangongzhi with a lot of opportunities to practice swordsmanship, and it was also because of these many killings that Nangongzhi made a name for himself as Yama. But after the war ended, Nangongzhi gradually lost the opportunity to fight, and his restless heart naturally calmed down. Nangongzhi finally had the opportunity to fully examine his shortcomings, and found that his strength had reached a bottleneck. It was impossible to get out of this predicament just by relying on the accumulation of swordsmanship, so Nangongzhi began to slowly discover the existence of swordsmanship. And then, after a long day of thinking, he finally came to a conclusion, and that is, potential. There is a time when a person's strength is limited, and heaven and earth do not exist. No matter how strong a person is, he will be limited by his own body's aptitude and be limited to a limited range. But heaven and earth are boundless, the size of the sky is unknown, and the thickness of the earth is unknown. The power called potential, that Nangongzhi thought of was to connect his body with heaven and earth, and borrow the power of heaven and earth. In other words, using the power of heaven and earth called natural energy, the power of heaven's disaster sword that can connect with natural energy is the key to Nangongzhi's potential. It is precisely because of this that Nangongzhi can use swordsmanship so exquisitely. Over the years, Nangongzhi gradually used this weapon called potential more and more ingeniously, and now it has reached the point where the sword domain is 5 meters around him. As long as it is within 5 meters of Nangongzhi's body, almost every place is under the control of Nangongzhi. As long as Nangongzhi wants, his sword can appear anywhere. Gently waving his heaven's disaster sword, scarlet blood turned into a line of blood that floated on the ground. Putting his sword back into the scabbard, he walked step by step towards the direction of the root ninjas. The root ninjas also know that in a one-on-one battle, they have no way to kill Nangongzhi, so they all joined together and rushed towards Nangongzhi. Every time a ninja enters within 5 meters of Nangongzhi, a sharp sword light will appear beside him, and a line of blood will appear on his neck, and he will lose his life. And all of this, in the eyes of the people next to him, is just Nangongzhi gently flicking his fingers with the hand holding the sword. Seizing an elite that Root has painstakingly cultivated is just such a simple thing. Naturally, Konoha's ninjas behind Nangong Zetsu also saw it clearly, and they all shouted one after another. Nangong-sama is mighty. Yama-sama really deserves his reputation. Standing behind the Woodleaf ninjas, Watergate also noticed the cheers in front of him, and after asking about the situation, his eyes also lit up. Nangongzhi. This kind of power must be in my hands. As long as I can have Nangongzhi to cooperate with me, then Woodleaf will definitely prosper in my hands. Chapter 327. Every root ninja who rushed towards Nangongzhi fell to the ground in an instant, blood spurting out from their severed necks. Gradually, even the soil couldn't completely absorb the blood. The blood gradually gathered into a shallow puddle, and around the puddle, there was still a lot of blood flowing into the puddle. From this, it can be seen how many root ninjas have already lost their lives in the hands of Nangongzhi. The people of Root have never been afraid of death, but this kind of worthless death really made the ninjas of Root feel very cold. After all, their companions rushed forward one after another and lost their lives one by one, and in exchange, Nangongzhi just flicked his finger. The price and the reward were simply not proportional. Such a situation really made many Root ninjas feel cold. Minato Watergate. 4th Hokage. How dare you bully me, how dare you bully my Root? A slightly old voice suddenly resounded in the battlefield. Nangongzhi heard this familiar voice, and his eyes finally flashed. The Root ninjas who rushed within 5 meters of Nangongzhi didn't seem to be affected by Nangongzhi's invisible slash. Just as they were about to attack, they found that Nangongzhi was looking at their eyes. Strange, isn't it? Obviously, Nangongzhi only has a pair of eyes, but every Root ninja felt that Nangongzhi's gaze penetrated their eyes. Nangongzhi's eyes were so cold that every Root ninja who had sealed their emotions to a certain extent felt a chill in their hearts. Nangongzhi was obviously full of flaws, and the terrifying sword domain just now no longer existed, but no Root ninja dared to step forward and attack Nangongzhi. Hishimura-sama. That's not right. How did I bully you? How did I bully your Root? What is the reason for all this, and what is the reason for the situation to reach this point? You and I are both well aware of it. Why do you have to say such childish words? Watergate, who was standing in the distance, suddenly appeared beside Nangongzhi. Watergate had a slight smile on his face, and he looked at Danzo standing opposite him with a bit of mockery in his eyes. Shimura Danzo and the 3 generations were of the same generation, and the 3 generations were already old and had white hair. Danzo himself now looked a little old, although his body still looked relatively strong. His white hair looked a little old. Looking at himself, he's only in his 30s, almost 40 years old. This is the peak of a ninja's life. With this kind of strength, how can Danzo compete with the young and strong 4th Hokage for power and profit? It seems. Hokage-sama, you seem to think that you can defeat me? I don't know where your confidence comes from. Is it the ninjas you brought with you, or the man called Yama who came with you? Danzo didn't seem to be aware of how dangerous his situation was, and he still stood firmly opposite Watergate with his cane. Aren't you underestimating me and my roots a little too much? As the Hokage, you should naturally know how much resources our root has consumed over the years. Moreover, what you know is only some information on the books. How could we not have gained anything after so many years? What's more, you're already at our doorstep, and you're trying to wipe out our roots. Regardless of whether these methods are useful or not, we naturally have to give it a try. Well. You have been delaying for so long, presumably no matter what kind of methods you have, you should be almost ready, right? Whether it's a mule or a horse, just take it out and show it to us. Minato knew very well that the reason why Danzo talked so much with him was to distract him, and at the same time, to buy some time for his backup plan. It wasn't that Watergate hadn't thought of stopping Danzo's preparations in advance, but if he directly destroyed Danzo's backup plan, he didn't know what kind of crazy things the exasperated Danzo would do. It would be better to do what he was doing now and deal with every move as they came, limiting the damage to the wood leaf as much as possible. He glanced at Nangongzhe. The two of them exchanged glances, and it seemed like they had some sort of communication. Nangongzhe took a few steps forward and spoke to Danzo. I don't know if the busy Danzo-sama still remembers a small character like me. Back then, Lord Danzo-sama could be said to be high and mighty. You planted your own people around me to monitor me, and when you wanted to control me, you simply kidnapped my family. For the sake of my family, you and I could be considered to have fought a battle back then. But because of this, I also left the wood leaf and drifted away. It's fine that I don't have a fixed residence, but my sister and my family have left this place that has occupied almost all of my memories, just like an undeserved calamity. Danzo-sama, do you know how much I wanted you to experience this feeling of anger and powerlessness at that time? Do you know? As he spoke, Nangongzhe's face became distorted, as if he was really exasperated. He pulled out the Heaven's Calamity sword from his hand. The dark blade was now emitting a moonlight-like brilliance. Nangongzhe's sudden attack also startled the guard standing beside Danzo. After all, the battle between Nangongzhe and the root ninjas was still vivid in their minds. Nangongzhe's combat power is really terrifying. Danzo still looked coldly at Nangongzhe's sudden attack, as if he saw something interesting. Danzo had already investigated Nangongzhe's temperament a few years ago. Danzo found Nangongzhe's current behavior very amusing. With a gentle wave of his hand, several figures quickly rushed out from behind Danzo. These people were wrapped in black clothes, and their aura was very strange. Nangongzhe's strength is already at the Kage level, but suddenly being entangled by 10 of these strange root ninjas, he couldn't get away. Even under the pressure of 10 root ninjas, he gradually left the central battlefield. Chapter 328. Nangongzhe looked at the 10 strange ninjas from root standing around him, and the anger and embarrassment he felt from being forced to come here disappeared in an instant. This attack on Root was originally led by Watergate and the Woodleaf ninjas as the main force. Nangongzhe said that he was here to help, but in fact, he was here to support the situation, and he would only make a move when there was no other choice. Just like now, Danzo obviously had some powerful backup plan, so Nangongja naturally had to seize the opportunity to be dragged here by these fierce-looking ninjas, and naturally leave the battlefield. It was precisely because of this that Nangongja was helplessly brought here by these ninjas. "Then, let me see what you are," Nangongja said, and the tribulation sword in his hand suddenly came out of its sheath. The sword domain that was so powerful just now was activated again at this moment, and it was activated under the premise that the tribulation sword was completely unsheathed, so the power of the sword domain was naturally multiplied. The sword flashed, and the mask on the face of the man in black closest to Nangongja was cut off. The mask naturally couldn't withstand the sharpness of the sword, and the entire mask was now a tattered piece of cloth hanging on the face of the root ninja opposite Nangongja. The face under the mask made Nangongja feel a little speechless, because it didn't look like a normal person's face at all. His complexion was so pale that it looked like he had been burned by sulfur. His face was filled with wrinkles and his skin was extremely loose. His eyes had also turned into a lifeless gray color. Can this kind of thing still be called a human? Nangongja looked at them and asked himself, but he couldn't come up with an answer. Because no matter how Nangongja looked at them, these strange ninjas from Root didn't look like humans. Seemingly aware of Nangongja's obvious indifference and disregard for their lives, the 10 strange ninjas roared loudly at this moment. The ninja opposite Nangongja didn't have a mask covering his face, so his open mouth was clearly seen by Nangongja. It was a mouth with 3 layers of mouthparts, and the tongue inside was also very different from that of ordinary people. If one had to compare, it was more like the tongue of a lizard, and it looked like it was deliberately contracted. Ghost. Ninja. The 10 ninjas roared at the sky at the same time, and their mouths simultaneously shouted such a name. "Are these your names?" Ninja. Sure enough, they don't look like humans at all. Although their bodies are full of vitality, their minds are in a complete mess. Maybe they are just guys who are ordered by someone? Looking at you living so miserably. It's better to let me help you ascend to paradise early. Ignoring the roars of these ninjas, Nangongja directly rushed toward one of the ninjas with his speed. Although the ninjas' minds were in a mess, they used their instincts to the extreme. Although their eyes couldn't clearly see Nangongja's moving figure, they still subconsciously jumped back and avoided Nangongja's sword. The sword has a shape, so naturally it can be dodged, and it can also be perceived by people with keen perception, but what about the invisible sword energy? Originally, because he avoided Nangongja's sword, the ninja's face was a bit happy. After all, he broke free from the threat of death. But immediately, his abdomen, which had clearly avoided the attack, became a mess of flesh and blood. The ninjas themselves didn't have pain nerves, but their body suddenly suffered such an attack, so the ninjas couldn't react for a while. Nangongja didn't care about the ninja's mood change in front of him, but his eyes were closely staring at the wound on the ninja's abdomen. Black and red granulation was constantly emerging from the wound. The wounds caused by the sword chi had sword chi remaining on them to heal. Now, the ghost ninja's abdomen was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. It's hard to imagine how terrifying the ninja's recovery ability would be if there was no restriction of the sword energy. Sure enough. The rich life aura I felt didn't exist for no reason. This life aura is contained in the ninjas' bodies, suppressing the ninjas' pain nerves, and at the same time significantly increasing their healing ability. A weapon that doesn't fear pain and can recover quickly? It's really interesting. I don't know where this rich life aura came from, just relying on the research of Root to cultivate such a powerful life form is simply a fantasy. Nangongja gradually became interested in these 10 ninjas surrounding him. He just wanted to use them to leave the center of the battlefield as soon as possible, but he didn't expect to encounter such an interesting thing. On the other side of the battlefield, Watergate looked at the huge bloated existence in front of him, and he was slightly stunned. The monster was like an amalgamation of rotting flesh. A rancid smell was so pungent that the rotting flesh vaguely formed the limbs and face of the monster. Just now, Watergate used his Flying Thunder God technique to cross space and appeared above the monster in front of him, and fiercely pressed his signature Rasengan. There was clearly a huge bloody hole in the monster's body, but in the blink of an eye, the bloody hole was mended by granulation sprouting out from the surrounding flesh. Watergate naturally didn't believe it. He thought that this monster must have some kind of core or vital point. Then he also pressed a Rasengan on the monster's face. But the result was the same. Even if the monster's head was hit, it still recovered in an instant. But Watergate faintly saw some clues, this kind of recovery ability. It's just like, Danzo, you dare to do such a thing? You are simply deceiving your master and destroying your ancestors. Watergate looked at Danzo very angrily. Danzo's behavior was also known by Watergate, but he didn't think that Danzo would dare to deceive his master and destroy his ancestors. So what? The dead are already dead. Since that's the case, why not let their legacy play its role? Let's see, just how powerful is this weapon that was created with their inheritance? Even if you are the Hokage, aren't you helpless at this moment? Chapter 329. That's right, whether it's the 10 shinobi standing around Nangongzhou or the huge rotten meat monster standing in front of Watergate, they all came from the legacy of a strong wood leaf, the cells of the first Hokage Senju Takuma. Whether it's their pale skin or their extraordinary recovery speed, they are all products of Root's research on replicating the first Hokage. Whether it's the shinobi or the giant beast, they are all products of failure. Over the years, Root has perfectly replicated only one shinobi with the first Hokage's genes, but although this person can use wood release, the effect is very weak, and he doesn't have the power of the first Hokage. Root has also stopped this research, but the failed products like the shinobi and the giant beast are still left behind. Just now, when facing the attacks from Minato and Nangongzhou, he saw that his roots were about to be destroyed. Danzo finally remembered these failed experiments. On the one hand, he let his researchers debug these failed products. On the other hand, he came out to delay Watergate's attack, so that his people can deal with the important information in the base that can't be leaked. Roar, roar. The giant beast in front of Watergate suddenly roared towards the sky, and the mouth made of rotten meat on its face instantly opened, and a fishy smell came out of the mouth of the giant beast. Moreover, there were a few sticky things connecting the upper and lower lips of the giant beast, which made people feel an instinctive sense of disgust from the bottom of their hearts. Naturally, Minato wouldn't just sit there and wait for his death. It would be troublesome to deal with such a giant beast with his own strength, and the most important thing was that this giant beast's size wasn't that easy to stop. So at this moment, Watergate's hands flew up and down, and a ninjutsu was completed in an instant. He gently bit the skin of his thumb, and a drop of blood flowed out from the wound. Leaving a trace of blood on his palm, Watergate pressed his palm on the ground, and a string of spells spread out from the place where Watergate's palm pressed. Summoning Jutsu. Toad Gamabunta, lend me your power. The smoke rose, but it dissipated in an instant. A toad wearing a short coat, a short sword on his back, and a huge pipe in his mouth suddenly appeared in the empty forest at this moment. Watergate boy, you really don't think of me if there's no trouble. This disgusting and ragged fellow seems to be quite troublesome to deal with. If I were to use my own dagger to hack such a fellow, I'm really worried that my dagger wouldn't be clean enough. Toad Gamabunta looked at the giant beast in front of him with disdain. He was even worried that the giant beast's flesh would make his short sword wouldn't be able to clean it. He simply didn't put the giant beast in his eyes. Roar, roar. After a loud roar, he charged straight towards Toad Gamabunta. After Watergate summoned Toad Gamabunta, he stood on top of his head and said loudly to Toad Gamabunta. There's no choice, boss. This guy's body is a huge threat. I naturally don't care about him, but with his recovery speed and body size, if he really enters the wood leaf, the damage he can cause wouldn't be less than 9 tails. You and I should just kill this guy here and not let him have a chance to damage the wood leaf. Toad Gamabunta was very close to Watergate, otherwise, he wouldn't have been summoned by Watergate and even allowed Watergate to stand on top of his head. Toad Gamabunta was naturally clear of Watergate's ambitions. The wood leaf was something that Watergate must protect. Thus, Toad Gamabunta removed the pipe from his mouth and tapped on the tobacco before keeping it in his bosom. Using his own hands, claws, he extended his hands to the hilt of his short blade, slowly unsheathing it and placing it in front of his body. One hand on the hilt, the other hand lightly pressed on the blade's spine. Evidently, he was displaying an extremely high-level blade technique. Mystic Wood Mountain's secret technique, water-severing blade. Toad Gamabunta's originally round eyes opened even wider at this moment. The short blade in his hand spun around half a circle. The hand that was originally pressing on the blade's spine also slowly brushed the blade's edge. Chakra continuously poured into the blade from the hand that was brushing the blade's edge. Toad Bunta raised the dagger up high, so high that it was even higher than his head. Ha! A loud roar resounded through the sky, and the dark clouds that had been slightly covering Ming Yu's face seemed to have dispersed in an instant. The short blade in Toad Bunta's hand fiercely pierced into the ground. Spiderweb cracks with white light appeared on the ground. No! It wasn't white light, but streams of highly compressed water spurting out. These streams of water emitted white light because of the moonlight's illumination. Gradually, these streams of water seemed to be under immense pressure as they shot towards the sky. Toad Gamabunta also exerted all his strength to pull out the short blade from the ground, slashing towards the sky. As the short blade was pulled out, the originally compressed streams of water completely exploded out. Because of the strength and direction of Toad Gamabunta's blade, these high-pressure streams of water rushed towards the gigantic beast. When these streams of water hit its body, the gigantic beast was gradually unable to resist. The rotting flesh on the gigantic beast's body started to fall off piece by piece under the scouring of the high-speed streams of water, being carried away by the streams of water. Visible to the naked eye, the gigantic beast's body started to shrink. The originally extremely intimidating roar also became softer and softer. The streams of water continued to forcefully scour the gigantic beast's body, but Toad Gamabunta's expression became increasingly unsightly. Because even though a portion of these streams of water came from underground water, whether it was the high pressure or the external streams of water, they were all maintained by Toad Gamabunta's chakra and water escape technique. Right now, Toad Gamabunta was actually nearing his limit. Watergate naturally understood this point. Thus, Watergate also slowly raised his right hand and placed it in front of his chest. Originally, this was a technique that I researched for the future Naruto, but I didn't expect to use it at this time. Chapter 330. Watergate controlled his chakra and condensed it in the palm of his right hand. Slowly, a blue chakra sphere appeared in Watergate's palm. Watergate's signature ninjutsu, Rasengan, appeared in Watergate's hand. However, the amount of chakra that Watergate released didn't decrease because of the formation of Rasengan. Instead, it became more and more. Around the Rasengan, which had begun to stabilize, a chakra was constantly rotating and entangling around the Rasengan because of the excessive infusion. Watergate also gathered the Rasengan in his hand high above his head. The volume of the Rasengan slowly began to expand. The huge amount of chakra made every ninja who was around the battlefield feel palpitations. Should it be said that Watergate was worthy of his reputation? This man who was praised by almost all ninjas as the most suitable ninja for me at this moment actually used such a terrible self-developed ninjutsu, which was a huge shock to many ninjas. My child was born with a chakra capacity that was beyond ordinary people. When he officially graduated as a genin, his chakra capacity had exceeded the total amount of chakra of ordinary jonin. I considered that it would be difficult for a child to control such a huge amount of chakra in his body, not to mention that there was a more important existence that constantly disturbed my child's control of chakra. Since there was no way to do it carefully, then I had to do it with extreme violence. After I figured out this point, I began to try to inject a large amount of chakra into the Rasengan. In this way, the power of the Rasengan could be improved. I called this ninjutsu, Odama Rasengan. A huge chakra sphere with a diameter of nearly 2 meters was held in the palm of Watergate's hand. A strong wind was generated around Watergate because of the rotation of the Odama Rasengan. Watergate was wearing a white haori with flames on his body. The words Yondame Hokage on Watergate's back were so dazzling at this moment. Watergate lightly jumped on top of Gamabunta's head, and his whole person was like a falcon gliding in the sky. He held the Odama Rasengan in his hand and pressed it towards the giant beast that was struggling in the high-pressure water flow. The huge chakra that was originally compressed in the Odama Rasengan instantly burst out. The high-pressure water flow and the remains of the giant beast rotated together, and the giant beast's body began to slowly distort and blur until it disappeared. After Gamabunta said goodbye to Watergate, he turned into a huge cloud of smoke and disappeared. Watergate also stood in front of Danzo in an instant, holding his special kunai in his hand and looking at Danzo with hostility. I didn't expect you to have grown to this point. Danzo looked at Watergate's great power in front of him, and the guards around him who have been trained by him to have no feelings at all, at this moment, because of the powerful strength shown by Watergate, their legs were slightly trembling because of the fear of death in their hearts. Danzo knew that he was defeated this time. Although he is not without the power to fight back in life-saving means, there is a limit to the number of times he can use these means, and he can't use them indefinitely. Now there are at least thousands of ninjas loyal to Watergate around him, and among them, there are not only Kage-level ninjas like Watergate and Nangongja, but there are also many Jonin-level ninjas. Even if he can save himself once or twice, how can he save himself 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times? At this moment, Danzo already had the heart to retreat, and he made a few gestures behind his back, indicating his subordinates to prepare to retreat. So several people standing behind Danzo slowly retreated. Originally, more than a dozen people surrounded Danzo to protect his safety, and it looked very imposing, but now only Danzo stood there alone, and it looked like a lonely hero. Danzo, surrender. Seeing that you have solved many difficult problems for Woodleaf for many years, I promise that I won't hurt your life. Even if it's a ninja from Root, I will still grant freedom to those who are kind after screening them. Standing opposite Danzo, Watergate put forward his own conditions. The reason why Watergate and Root are fighting is because the existence of Root hinders Watergate's centralization of power in Woodleaf, and it is obvious that Root is the most despised person in many things, so dealing with Root has become a matter of course. Minato Watergate. The fourth Hokage. I, Shimura Danzo, set foot on the battlefield decades ago in order to protect Woodleaf. Like the 3 generations that each of you admire so much, I am also the disciple of the first and second Hokage. You are standing here one by one, saying that I betrayed Woodleaf, that I am the sinner of Woodleaf. But have you ever thought that without me, without Root, will Woodleaf still be the quiet and peaceful place in your eyes? Will Woodleaf still be as pure and flawless as in your eyes? It is me, it is Root who carried the darkness of Woodleaf on my own. This world has always been a place where there is light, there is shadow, there is a surface, there is a part that is covered. Woodleaf is a raging flame, and it will also produce a lot of shadows. You want to eliminate all the shadows, but without the shadows, will the so-called light still be light? When Danzo said this, whether it was the Woodleaf ninjas who followed Watergate or the ninjas who originally belonged to Root, at this moment, their eyes were slightly moved. Ninjas themselves are a group of people who live in the darkness, and the dark side of the world is their habitat. So what Danzo said is indeed something that everyone can see with their own eyes. So we have to surrender to the darkness that you said must exist? Watergate listened to Danzo's words. In fact, there was a faint change in his heart. From this, it can be seen that Danzo's personal charisma and strong temptation is a person with a strong personality. In order not to let people's hearts waver, Watergate also refuted. We do live in the darkness, but no one longs for the light more than us. The evil in the world can't be completely eliminated, but we should never condone the existence of these evils, and acquiesce to these evils to occupy our hearts. People are human. Because we are not beasts driven by our own instincts, we are guided by our own reason to do things that are in line with human ethics and in line with the light. Danzo, whether it is you or Root, you have completely become the slaves of the darkness in your heart. I don't think you are allowed to continue to threaten the freedom and life of more people in Woodleaf. Chapter 331. Watergate's speech was particularly impassioned, coupled with his handsome face and amiable posture. Even if people don't like such a slightly chinibu and righteous speech, they still have a certain degree of intimacy with Watergate's words in their hearts. After all, people still prefer such people and things that are full of righteousness. Kid, you're too noisy. Listening to Watergate's words, Danzo had a look of disdain, because Watergate's current appearance is exactly the same as Yuan Fei, who defeated him and became the 3 generations Hokage. That's the only time you can say such pretty words. Who doesn't know how to say such words without any basis, but just to make people feel comfortable? But when you really face all kinds of difficulties in life, these beautiful words are useless. Today, Root indeed fell in your hands, but without Root, Woodleaf will once again establish a department that is no different from Root, because the existence of Woodleaf can't be without the support of Root. Listening to Danzo's words, Watergate had an inexplicable feeling in his heart. Bad. This guy is going to escape. This was the first thought that appeared in Watergate's heart. Since he had a premonition of this possibility, Watergate naturally made a prompt decision and said to the many ninjas behind him, "Everyone, get ready to launch an AoE attack within 100 meters of Shimura Danzo. Shimura Danzo must not be allowed to leave Woodleaf and endanger the entire ninja world." The ninjas who followed Watergate to Root's base for the extermination plan were naturally experienced ninjas. After listening to Danzo's words, they immediately reacted that Danzo was going to escape. After receiving Watergate's order, without the slightest hesitation, the ninjas who followed Watergate began to use their best AoE ninjutsu to attack. And the ninjas of Root also rushed in front of Danzo, to ensure the safety of Danzo's escape. Above the sky, a dazzling light sputtered out from the collision of ninjutsu. And Danzo also slowly moved his figure to a shadow. Just as he was about to escape, a voice sounded in Danzo's ear. "Shimura Danzo, I clearly promised you that I won't kill you. Why did you choose to stand on the opposite side of Woodleaf? If that's the case, then all the promises I've made just now will no longer be effective. I will do everything in my power to kill you right here." The person who spoke was naturally the 4th Hokage, Watergate. Danzo glanced at the weeds at his feet that didn't look so conspicuous. Presumably, this kunai was deliberately left behind by Watergate when he was fighting with the rotten meat behemoth to prevent Danzo from suddenly retreating. To be honest, I really admire your ability, Minato. If it was possible, I would have accepted you as my disciple in the first place. But nothing is possible. Perhaps, you and I are destined to walk on 2 opposite paths, gradually drifting apart. Today, I will leave Woodleaf unscathed. And you will be ready in Woodleaf, waiting for the day when I make a comeback. I will be the next Hokage of Woodleaf. Danzo didn't hide his desire for the position of Hokage, but Watergate didn't take it to heart. After all, Danzo was old and muddle-headed, his strength must be far from his peak state. On the other hand, his body was strong and his strength was improving all the time. He could end Danzo's life now, so wouldn't his threats and ambitions be useless? These words, I'll leave them for you to think about in your dreams in hell. Watergate directly changed his right hand into a claw and fiercely pressed down on Danzo's abdomen. A blue chakra ball also formed in the palm of Watergate's right hand. Watergate thought that Danzo would try his best to avoid his attack, but Danzo didn't seem to have the intention to avoid it at all. Seeing that the Rasengan had already fallen on Danzo's body, but the scene of the chakra twisting Danzo's abdomen, and Danzo flying because of the huge force of the Rasengan didn't appear at all. The Rasengan passed through Danzo's abdomen like passing through air, and even Watergate's arm and body directly passed through Danzo's body because of inertia. At the moment when the Rasengan passed through Danzo's abdomen, Watergate immediately used the tip of his left foot to rub the ground with his right foot horizontally, and instantly turned his back to Danzo. Illusion. Watergate tentatively said to Danzo. After all, when he attacked Danzo with the Rasengan just now, it didn't feel real at all. In such a situation, the first thing that came to mind was an illusion. But as if to mock Watergate, Danzo slowly bent down and picked up the special kunai that Watergate had just quietly thrown here from the ground. He even played with it twice in his hand and threw it at Watergate. As soon as he reached out, the Watergate caught his kunai. There was a flash of confusion in his eyes, and at this time, Danzo's voice reached Watergate's ears. Do you think that I, who can touch real objects and even launch attacks, is a virtual image created by Genjutsu? Half of Danzo's face was covered by bandages, but Watergate found that Danzo's tightly wrapped arm was trembling a little at the moment, as if he was suffering from some kind of pain. Didn't I just tell you? There are many things that can't be left there just because the owner died. What I just used is indeed a genjutsu, but it's a real illusion. For you, I'm indeed an illusion that can't be touched, but as long as I want to, I can be real. How about it? Did I make good use of this inheritance? Watergate could guess that the rotten meat monster was related to the cells of First Hokage, but Watergate had no clue about the current situation. He could only watch as Danzo slowly turned around and walked towards the depths of the jungle. Watergate didn't think of attacking Danzo's back while he was defenseless, but Watergate clearly saw the tender leaves of the grass around Danzo's feet directly passing through Danzo's ankle. Watergate wasn't sure whether his attack would work or not. But in the blink of an eye, Watergate also figured it out. He didn't come for Danzo, but for Root. Although some of Root's personnel may have left, it's a bit whimsical to think that they can make a comeback with only a few of them and Danzo. So, the most important thing for him to do now is to return to the battlefield behind him with many ninjas who are loyal to him and wipe out these Root ninjas. Chapter 332. On the other side of the battlefield, Nangongja looked at the ninja ghosts in front of him that had been cut black and blue, but they were still slowly crawling towards him. This was because Nangongja gradually realized that these puppet-like things with weak self-awareness seemed to have an extremely high affinity with the natural energy of the natural world. When he left wounds on their bodies again and again, and they consumed their own energy to heal quickly, this feeling was not so obvious. However, when the life force of these enduring ghosts was depleted, they seemed to instinctively start to absorb the natural energy from the natural world into their bodies to replenish the life force in their bodies. Unlike Minato Watergate, who was the fourth Hokage, Nangongja didn't have access to such information about the past Hokage, so naturally, he didn't know the mystery of the first Hokage's cells, but Nangongja himself can mobilize natural energy for his own use, and to a certain extent, he is even similar to the first Hokage. So Nangongja was very curious about the way these ninja ghosts convert natural energy into vitality. In the past few days, Nangongja had directly chopped 9 out of the 10 enduring ghosts into meat paste that they could not recover from. He only left behind the enduring ghost whose face cloth had been cut by him. Then, he used the Heaven's Calamity Sword to cut off the tendons of his arms and legs and break his spine. Even if he has a majestic vitality, such injuries are not so easy to heal. Subsequently, Nangongja began to constantly cut the ninja ghost's body, and has been observing the process of the ninja ghost converting the natural energy in the air into vitality in his body. Although there are still some doubts, Nangongja feels that he has touched the door a little. Just when Nangongja wanted to use the sword energy contained in his body to directly turn the ninja ghost in front of him into meat paste like his 9 companions, but at this moment, he saw a huge spherical storm formed by water and wind not far from him. This move. No matter how I look at it, it has the same effect as Watergate's Rasengan. It seems that Watergate used his Rasengan to develop a derivative ninjutsu. It should be said that he really is the fourth Hokage, Watergate. Looking at the magnificent scene caused by Watergate, Nangongja was slightly surprised. Then Nangongja looked at the dying ninja ghost under his feet, but at the same time, it was full of vitality. Didn't Mount Myaboku also have a way to cultivate natural energy? Maybe Watergate has also started to touch this aspect of cultivation, then there is no need to destroy this ninja ghost. Giving it to Watergate as a gift is also a good choice. Well, consider yourself unlucky, you can peacefully become an experiment material. But you should have lived such a life, right? It can be regarded as sending you back to your original life. After saying that, Nangongja stabbed the sword in his hand into the ninja ghost's abdomen, and the sword tip directly penetrated the ninja ghost's lumbar spine. The ninja ghost's sense of pain is dull, not to mention that after the lumbar spine injury, the instinctive pain has become even weaker, so the ninja ghost didn't make any sound. Instead, it looked at Nangongja's sword, and saw that it was getting closer and closer to Nangongja's body, so it shouted excitedly. That kind of ear-piercing howl was so unbearable to Nangongja's ears, and directly showed a displeased expression. Noisy. After that, he released the internal energy in his body and sneaked into the ninja ghost's body through the sword, and when the internal energy entered the ninja ghost's body, it directly burst out. After all, the ninja ghost has a human form, and in many places it retains the characteristics of a human. Nangongja's internal energy directly began to wreak havoc in the ninja ghost's body, and countless tendons and blood vessels were torn under the effect of the internal energy. A very unnatural red color appeared under the ninja ghost's skin, and even blood slowly seeped out of the pores. The originally pale and loose skin looked even more strange under the contrast of the red color. Because the tendons and blood vessels in its body were all torn, the ninja ghost finally lost the strength to bare its fangs and brandish its claws, and could only weakly be lifted up in the air by the sword. From time to time, blood would flow out of the ninja ghost's limbs and mouth, and fall to the ground. If it was a normal person, they would have already died from excessive blood loss, but the ninja ghost's own life force saved its life. Nangongja seemed to be very satisfied with the way he handled it, and slowly nodded to the half-dead ninja ghost, then jumped up and ran towards the direction of Watergate. Only 9 piles of minced meat and puddles of blood were left on the ground. The air was filled with the smell of blood, and even after a long time, it still didn't dissipate. Seeing Nangongja walking towards him with his black shoes stained with meat and blood, Watergate didn't feel any shock. Instead, he looked at the half-dead ninja ghost that was lifted up by Nangongja with the sword. Sure enough. Are these also clones that Danzo used the first-generation cells to cultivate? Compared to the giant rotten meat beast, although these ninja ghosts seem to be a lot weaker, they have more in-depth research value. Watergate. This thing is very mysterious. It can actually absorb natural energy into its body and forcefully convert it into life force. I know that the Senjutsu chakra is practiced in Mount Myaboku. After all, I also learned a lot about natural energy in Mount Myaboku. I thought that it might be useful to you, so I brought it here to show it to you. In fact, when Watergate used the Odama Rasengan and Gamabunta's water blade to make the giant rotten meat beast disappear without a trace, he felt a little distressed. After all, this was the product of the first Hokage's cells after the full research of the root. Although he denied using the first Hokage's cells in such a way, since there is already a result, how can he refuse? Originally, when Watergate thought that he wouldn't get such an experimental material, his mood was still a little low. But when Nangongja brought such a thing to him, he was still a little surprised. As for not being able to use human bodies for experiments? Take a look at this thing. Its body was pale with a hint of red, and its skin was very loose. Some people would even believe that it was an evil spirit summoned from hell by a special ninjutsu, so why should he talk to such a non-human? He fed it well, and occasionally took some blood and cut it into pieces. Isn't that already a good deed? This is simply the best experimental material. Chapter 333. Although it was an excellent material, in order to maintain his image among the ninjas, Watergate didn't directly take the shinobi down. Instead, he looked at the heavily injured enduring ghost with a compassionate expression and said to Nangongja with sympathy, "Nangongja, this ninja who looks a bit unusual must be a ninja who survived Danzo's cruel experiment. Since he was born in Woodleaf, then he is naturally a member of Woodleaf. As the Hokage of Woodleaf, I have the obligation to provide protection and treatment for this kind of Woodleaf ninja. Now that Danzo has been expelled, this ninja will be a member of Woodleaf from now on. You put him down first, I will send someone to treat him." After that, Watergate waved his hand and called two of his direct umbu to stand in front of Nangongja. It seems like they wanted to take the shinobi down from Nangongja's sword. But Nangongja's expression wasn't so good at the moment. Because when Watergate mentioned Danzo, he didn't use the word exterminate or imprison, but expel. Doesn't that mean that Danzo has safely left Woodleaf? This is a bit inconsistent with my purpose. As if he saw Nangongja's thoughts, Watergate walked forward and patted Nangongja's shoulder. With his usual warm smile, he said to Nangongja, "Don't worry, Danzo has suffered heavy losses this time. 80% of his men are hidden in various bases in Woodleaf. Our attack this time was very sudden, so a lot of important information and materials were not transferred out. So it can be said that the root has not been completely eradicated. There are only a few of them left. Whether it's you or me, it's easy to deal with them. Why are you so worried about Danzo's life? You and your family are safe now." Although Watergate's expression looked very gentle, the hand that patted Nangongja's shoulder contained a lot of strength. As Watergate spoke, the strength in his hand increased. In the end, although Nangongja didn't have any reaction, some of the dust under Nangongja's feet jumped slightly because of Watergate's strength. Nangongja's mood at the moment could be said to be terrible. As expected, no one in a high position would care about the promises between each other. As long as he achieved his goal, it wasn't impossible to turn his back on him. He waved the sword in his hand slightly forward. The tip of the sword that passed through the ninja's body was directly pointed at Watergate's nose. The two umbu standing next to Watergate and Nangongja directly took out their kunai from their ninja bags and pointed it at Nangongja. The ninjas under Watergate who were cleaning the battlefield also stopped their movements and looked at Nangongja closely. As long as Nangongja did anything that could threaten Watergate's safety, they would immediately swarm him. "Minato, you've finally cleared all the obstacles in front of you. Without Sandame, without Danzo, a mere elder group is nothing more than a paper doll in your eyes. You can play with it however you like. I, Nangongja, congratulate you with this gift." Then, Nangongja fiercely waved the sword in his hand. The ninja that was pierced by the sword was directly thrown to the ground, creating a cloud of smoke. The sound of the sword cutting through the air and the slightly silver-white sword mark left in the air was so eye-catching. Obviously, Nangongja's mood was not so good at the moment. Watergate was not affected by Nangongja's mood at all. He still had a smile on his face as he stretched out his hand and disturbed the sword mark left by Nangongja in the air. He seemed to be very happy that Nangongja could congratulate Nangongja. Then, he used his eyes to signal his subordinates to carry the fallen ninja away. Nangongja looked deeply at Watergate. He didn't even have the mood to say goodbye. He directly turned and left the battlefield in the direction of his home. Looking at Nangongja's back, Watergate's chief strategist, Shikaku Nara, slowly walked to Watergate's side. He lowered his voice and said to Watergate, "This Nangongja is still the same as before. Solitary and unruly. He doesn't have the slightest sense of belonging to the Woodleaf. This time, we didn't do as he wished. Maybe in his heart, he has already started to resent us. If necessary, I can bring a team of elites to deal with him. Although he is still strong, I am confident that I can deal with him." Shikaku Nara, who originally looked a bit ferocious because of the several scars on his face, had a fierce look in his eyes at this moment. He looked even more terrifying. Shikaku Nara's meaning was naturally very clear. Nangongja was an overly sharp weapon. Now that the weapon has developed hatred, as a ninja of the Woodleaf village, Shikaku Nara felt that it was necessary to destroy this resentful weapon. Watergate heard Shikaku Nara's words, but he didn't react. He just turned around and looked at Shikaku Nara's eyes. He put his hands on Shikaku Nara's shoulders and stared at Shikaku Nara's eyes. He slowly said, "Shikaku Nara, I'm indeed not as good as you when it comes to strategizing. But when it comes to controlling people's hearts, you're still not mature enough. Indeed, Nangongja is an overly sharp weapon. But why can't we be the ones to control this weapon? Nangongja is indeed strong enough, but his concerns are too obvious. As long as these concerns still exist, this sharp blade has a scabbard. As long as we have the scabbard in our hands, why should we be afraid that we can't use the sharp blade?" After saying this sentence, Watergate directly walked past Shikaku Nara's side and began to walk to the place where the ninjas gathered in this battle. He maintained a half-heartache and half-relief smile while comforting those injured ninjas. Looking at Watergate's actions, even Shikaku Nara, who has always been as wise as an abyss, felt a chill in his heart at this moment. Since when has the position of Hokage been held by a person without scheming? Nangongja, at this moment, was standing on a branch overlooking the battlefield from a distance. His eyes were cold. If Shikaku Nara was here, he may be very surprised to find that the look in Nangongja's eyes at this moment was so similar to the look in Watergate's eyes. Watergate. We still don't know who is the one holding the sharp blade. After he finished speaking, Nangongja turned around and left the branch he was standing on, disappearing without a trace. Chapter 334. When Nangongja stood in front of his house, the sky was already bright. Although the sun had not directly revealed itself, a beautiful white color had already appeared in the eastern sky. Nangongja's house was slightly away from the downtown area of Woodleaf village, so there was still a large area of forest around it. The slightly cold morning air and the humid atmosphere in the forest combined to form a thin layer of mist that shrouded the earth, looking exceptionally gentle. Gently pushing open the door of his house, Nangongja did not want to disturb the rest of the girls at home. The wooden door that was painted with a layer of paint was slowly pushed open by Nangongja's palm. Nangongja also walked a few steps into the entrance of his house. Quietly taking off his coat and shoes, Nangongja walked into the living room of his house. To Nangongja's surprise, the girls in his house were actually sitting in the living room. Whether it was little Linger who loved to sleep in, Nangong-ro and Mashiro who usually woke up early to make breakfast for everyone, their eyes were slightly bloodshot at this moment. Their eyes were still a little tired from staying up late. When they saw that Nangongja was on duty, they quietly hid it. The faces of the three girls immediately changed into warm smiles as they looked at Nangongja. The three girls and Nangongja looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Mashiro seemed to feel that it was inappropriate, so she slowly stood up, tidied up her clothes, and said to Nangongja, "Last night, I was busy last night. I was busy all night last night and only just came back. I've already cooked porridge. It should be time to eat now. I'll go get a bowl for you. After eating some porridge, you should rest well too, gong gong." As she said that, Mashiro walked to Nangongja's side and naturally took the robe that was stained with blood from Nangongja's hands. She also walked to the entrance and took Nangongja's dirty shoes to the laundry area. Obviously, she was going to tidy it up. From the beginning to the end, Mashiro did not say much, and Nangongja did not ask much either. After all, Mashiro was a top spy trained by root. As one of the participants of the plan, Nangongja naturally let Mashiro detect something. Not to mention other things, Nangongja had concealed his presence time and time again. Mashiro was completely aware of it. Before this operation, Nangongja had also collected a lot of information from the Blood Garment Pavilion. Mashiro had been helping Nangongja manage the affairs in the Blood Garment Pavilion for all these years, so she naturally knew a lot about these things. She watched as Mashiro went to the kitchen to get porridge for Nangongja. Nangongro also carefully looked at Nangongja's body. She did not find any injuries on him, so she did not say much and walked to her bedroom. It seemed like she wanted to catch up on some sleep. After the two older sisters left, little Linger relaxed a little. She affectionately pulled Nangongja's arm and let Nangongja sit beside her. Brother Nangong, Brother Nangong. Are those guys from Root very powerful? Little Linger really wants to hear the story of you fighting with those bad guys from Root. Can you tell Little Linger about it? Xiaoling Air's pair of watery eyes stared at Nangongja. Nangongja couldn't resist for a moment. Therefore, Nangongja decided to tell Xiaoling Air everything that he knew about this matter to an unrelated person like Xiaoling Air. Then, are we safe from now on? After listening to Nangongja's explanation, Ling Air's eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. She asked Nangongja, "What's the matter?" Nangongja explained a lot about this operation. She learned about the destruction of Root and the escape of Danzo. That's right, at least we're safe in Woodleaf. The current Hokage of Woodleaf, Watergate, has a good relationship with me, so with him looking after us, we won't encounter the same dangerous situation as before. Nangongja did not tell Little Linger about the schemes between him and Watergate, because these small schemes could not change the fact that Watergate and Nangongja needed each other's help. Even in such a relationship, Minato was still in a relatively weak position, because Minato had been tightly locked by Konoha, and Nangongja not only held the power of the Blood Cloak Pavilion in his hands, but he also didn't have much control over such power. Then, Little Linger, can Brother Nangong promise me one thing? Looking at Nangongja, Little Linger said timidly to Nangongja. Little Linger was usually a carefree girl. She usually said whatever she wanted to say, but now her timid appearance really made Nangongja feel very fresh. It was just like when she left the village with Nangongja, Little Linger was full of fear for the future. Nangongja felt that he might know what Little Linger wanted to ask of him, so he gently placed his hand on Little Linger's head and gently stroked her beautiful hair with the bell ornament. Little Linger, tell me. Now that everything is basically settled, if you have anything you want to do, brother can go with you. Perhaps because of Nangongja's attitude, Little Linger, who was originally a little nervous, slowly calmed down. Little Linger's eyes contained a rare bit of heaviness and sorrow. Grandfather, he, has been gone for many years. But I have never had the time to go back and see him. When you were in the Blood Cloak Pavilion, you also sent some subordinates to dig up grandfather's grave, but because of various things, there was no way to personally pull out a weed or light an incense for grandfather's grave. So, I actually just want you to come with me to the village where I used to live and visit my grandfather's grave. After hearing Little Linger's words, Nangongja also remembered that when he was seriously injured and on the verge of death, Mashiro carried him through the forest with great difficulty. Fortunately, they met Ah Wang and he was able to receive treatment in time to save his life. When it was time to leave, Ah Wang knew that he was nearing the end of his life, so he entrusted Little Linger to him. With that said, Nangongja also wanted to see the last traces left behind by Ah Wang in this world. Chapter 335. After agreeing to Lil Linger's request, Lil Ling was finally satisfied as she ran back to her room to catch up on her sleep. However, even the dullest person would be able to sense the joy in Lil Linger's heart. Nangongja's greatest wish was for his family to be happy. Nangongja stood up from the cushion he was sitting on and slowly walked into his kitchen. Mashiro was currently holding a small dish in her left hand and a spoon in her right hand. It seemed like she was trying out the final taste of the congee she made. Mashiro naturally heard Nangongja's movements, but Mashiro still didn't turn his head. It was unknown whether he was looking at Nangongzhe or the pot of kanji in front of him. Originally, I didn't want Rower and Little Linger to know that you participated in such a dangerous plan, but I was still worried about you. I wanted to personally see you return home, so I sat in the living room and didn't go back to rest. However, Rower and Little Linger are a group of mischievous people. They immediately saw through the whole story and insisted on waiting with me for you to come back. After waiting for an entire night, the two of them must be exhausted. Mashiro turned around and placed the dish in front of Nangongzhe. He smiled faintly at Nangongzhe and said, "Do you want to try it to see if it suits your taste?" Looking at the dish that was still steaming, Nangongzhe gently blew on it. He reached out to take the dish from Mashiro's hand and placed it next to his mouth. Seeing Nangongzhe's action, Mashiro suddenly smiled gently. He gently tapped Nangongzhe's forehead with a finger and said to Nangongzhe with a doting tone, "You are still as catty as ever." When Nangongzhe heard Mashiro's words, he wasn't shy at all. Instead, he felt proud and said to Mashiro, "Isn't that because of Mashiro's superb cooking skills? That's why a picky guy like me can eat what I like every day." Mashiro looked at Nangongzhe's face and said to Nangongzhe with a hint of reminiscence, "Back then, I definitely didn't expect that I would become such a person. Back then, it was the first time I left Root's cage and was sent to spy on you. Back then, I didn't have any common sense and even foolishly allowed you to take advantage of me. But it was also the cold and indifferent you that slowly made me feel the taste of home. You made me slowly turn from a tool that was deliberately cultivated to a person who could feel at ease around the stove every day." Mashiro slowly placed the spoon in his hand on the table beside him. He reached out his hand and gently caressed Nangongzhe's face. He used his fingertips to feel the wrinkles on Nangongzhe's face. With a bit of warmth to the touch, Mashiro instantly felt that her heart was at peace. Even if his hand was caressing the man who had accompanied him for many years and allowed him to slowly grow up, Mashiro's heart didn't have any meaningless feelings at all. Instead, he felt a little heartache for this man. Because although Nangongzhe's face still looked young and handsome, compared to the first time he saw Nangongzhe, the tiredness in his eyes was so strong that it was difficult to ignore. Mashiro. Mashiro's eyes were filled with undisguised heartache. Nangongzhe naturally saw it clearly. "You don't have to say that. At that time, I also left Woodleaf for various reasons and accepted the seemingly absurd and strange task of traveling around the ninja world with you. At that time, I was just like an injured beast, eager to leave the place I originally lived and avoid the people I knew. But it was because I met you at that time that I mustered up the courage to face all the things I should face. At that time, if it wasn't for you, I would have already lost my life in that jungle. It was you who brought me to find a Wang and gave me a chance to continue living. So, there is no so-called debt between you and me. From the moment you saved my life, you're already my family. For my family, I'm willing to face anything, no matter what." Nangongzhe and Mashiro's eyes collided at this moment. The strong friendship in their eyes couldn't be ignored, but Mashiro suddenly moved his eyes away. He picked up the spoon again. His eyes were a little evasive. He used his spoon to point at Nangongzhe's taste dish and said, "The taste is okay, right? If it's okay, I will give you a bowl first. After eating, go and have a good rest. After all, you should have experienced a lot of dangerous things last night." Nangongzhe's expression was a little sluggish, but he still said to Mashiro, "Oh. The taste is very good. I can definitely sleep well after eating the porridge." Mashiro took out a wooden bowl from the cupboard and gave Nangongzhe a bowl of porridge. He scattered a little bit of seaweed and sesame seeds on the porridge, making the porridge look more delicious. Without waiting for Nangongzhe to say anything, Mashiro turned around and walked away. Looking at Mashiro's back, Nangongzhe wanted to say something, but he still closed his mouth. After all, inviting Mashiro, himself, and Little Linger to visit the grave of Ah Wang, who once saved them and had a close relationship with the three of them, wasn't in a hurry to inform Mashiro. After all, there were still some things that needed to be prepared. Right now, his relationship with Watergate was superficial. If he brought Little Linger and Mashiro to the village, leaving only Nangong Ro and the wood leaf, Nangongja wouldn't be so relieved. But he called Mashiro because when he was entrusted to take care of Little Linger, Mashiro was at the scene. Why would he call his sister? In order to thank Ah Wang for saving his brother, so that he could continue to live with his brother. Needless to say, this reason did have some credibility. With his imagination running wild, Nangongja held the wooden bowl in his hand and sat on the cushion where he was sitting before. He slowly ate. Behind a wall that Nangongja couldn't see, Mashiro was leaning against the wall. His cheeks were blushing like rouge. Listening to Nangongja's praise from time to time while eating the porridge, Mashiro's blush became even more conspicuous. Chapter 336. A few days later, Nangongja found an opportunity to tell Mashiro that he had promised Little Linger that they would visit Ah Wang's tomb together. Mashiro was naturally very grateful to Nangongja for saving Ah Wang when they were in trouble. Therefore, he gladly agreed to Nangongja's invitation. Because he was worried about his sister's safety in Woodleaf village, Nangongja actually went to look for Nangong Ro. However, Nangong Ro didn't seem to want to visit Ah Wang's tomb with Little Linger and Mashiro, so she made some excuses. Nangongja also couldn't force his sister to visit Ah Wang's tomb with him. Therefore, Nangongja found the people from the Blood Cloth Pavilion in Woodleaf village and directly gave them the highest level of protection. If there were any abnormalities, they could directly notify Nangongja through the Blood Cloth Pavilion's channels. After making these arrangements, Nangongja's heart was a little relieved. After greeting Watergate and pretending to be polite for a while, he directly left Woodleaf village with Little Linger and Mashiro. The village where Little Linger and Ah Wang originally lived in wasn't that close to Woodleaf village. In order to take care of Mashiro and Little Linger's speed, Nangongja also restrained his speed. On the road, the three of them walked for nearly half a month. In order to reminisce about the past, they even deliberately took a detour to the place where they had been before. Although Nangongja didn't understand this kind of sentimental behavior, since it was the request of the two girls, he naturally didn't have any objections. Looking at the familiar forest and road along the way, Nangongja also became a little girl like Mashiro and Little Linger. Looking at the surrounding environment, there was a little bit of sunset in the west sky. Nangongja waved at Mashiro and Little Linger and said, "Let's rest for a while. Let's all rest for a while. I looked around and felt that we should be able to reach Xiaoling Air's village tomorrow. Let's rest here for today and set off tomorrow morning." Mashiro and Little Linger also looked at the sky and knew that it was indeed time to set up camp and rest. Thus, they nodded and walked to where Nangongja was standing. They seemed to be very familiar with the most basic things like setting up a tent. The few of them were already very familiar with the process and naturally, they finished setting up the camp quickly. They even started a bonfire to make food and drive away the beasts that might be lurking around the camp at night. Although to Nangongja and the others, beasts weren't anything threatening, it was still quite annoying to have a beast come out to disturb them while they were sleeping soundly. The slightly orange-red flames of the bonfire danced on the wood, as if a female singer in a red dress was dancing gracefully. It had a natural beauty. Little Linger, who was sitting beside the bonfire, didn't seem to be as excited as the flames. Instead, she seemed to be a little quiet. Her pair of eyes were slightly absent-minded as she stared at the bonfire. However, no one knew where her thoughts had drifted to. Humans actually had many common problems. For example, when they were angry, they would lose their rationality. When they were intoxicated by love, they would become confused. When they stood next to their hometown, they would always have a feeling that they didn't dare to approach. They were afraid that their hometown would become different from their impression of it. They were afraid that many people who used to be familiar with them would forget about them. This kind of feeling was called timid when one is close to home. It was a very normal thing. Nangongzhi took a blanket and quietly sat beside little Linger. He gently placed his hand on little Linger's shoulder. Little Linger was slightly dazed before she reacted. She looked at Nangongzhi and asked with some doubts. "Brother Nangong. What's the matter? Did Mashiro Jijia need my help to cook?" Although little Linger wasn't that good at cooking, she would occasionally help Mashiro and Nangong at home. She could be considered to be experienced in the kitchen. Therefore, when she saw Nangongzhi suddenly appear beside her, little Linger immediately thought that it was Mashiro who asked Nangongzhi to come over to help cook. Nangongzhi shook his head and denied little Linger's question. He then opened the blanket in his hand and draped it over little Linger's shoulder. He gently said, "The temperature in the forest is quite cold at night. Although it's near the bonfire, you still need to wear more clothes. Wouldn't it be bad if you catch a cold?" Little Linger looked at the blanket that Nangongzhi draped over her body. She seemed to dislike the blanket that Nangongzhi hastily draped over her body. Therefore, she rearranged her little body and completely wrapped herself in the blanket. Only her two small hands could be seen grabbing the edge of the blanket tightly. However, Nangongzhi could still see that little Linger's body was slightly trembling even after being wrapped in such a thick blanket. The reason for her trembling naturally wasn't because of the night breeze, but because of little Linger's own heart. It had been more than 10 years since she left this remote village. That little Linger from back then had grown into a beautiful and charming girl. However, this also meant that she hadn't seen her grandfather's burial ground for more than 10 years. The deep sense of self-blame that had been suppressed in her heart was like a pile of stones that weighed down on little Linger's heart. For a moment, she actually felt a little breathless. Just a little bit more and she would be able to see her grandfather's resting place. However, little Linger's heart wasn't filled with joy. Instead, she had a feeling of escaping. As time passed, this feeling became more and more intense. "Don't be afraid," little Linger could feel the corners of her eyes turning moist. Her legs were also slightly trembling. Suddenly, a gentle voice sounded in little Linger's ears. Nangongzhi was still looking at the dancing flames above the bonfire. However, little Linger knew that the person who spoke was definitely her brother Nangong, who had accompanied her for more than 10 years. He had watched her grow from a child to where she was today. Trembling, little Linger inhaled a little of the cold air in the forest. Then, she probed Nangongzhi and said, "But," the hand that was originally on little Linger's shoulder lightly patted little Linger's shoulder. Nangongzhi finally turned his face to face with little Linger and said, "Don't be afraid. No matter what, aren't I and your Mashiro sister still here with you? So little Linger, don't be afraid. Since you're here, you should do what you're supposed to do." Chapter 337. The night quietly slipped away from Nangongzhi and company's dreams. When little Linger opened her eyes, she discovered that her brother Nangong was already packing their luggage. Sister Mashiro had already prepared breakfast and seemed to be waiting for her. Coming to visit her grandfather's grave was little Linger's own request. Although Nangongzhi and Mashiro were indebted to Wang, the reason why they were able to sleep in such a remote place was because of her own request. Even if it was just this, it would not allow him to shrink back. "I must face these things that I should face in the first place. Are you awake? Come on, it's time for breakfast." Sensing that little Linger had woken up, Mashiro revealed a motherly smile. She waved towards little Linger and called little Linger over for breakfast. Little Linger stood up and tidied up her sleeping bag. She sat beside Mashiro and began to enjoy some mushrooms and wild herbs that seemed to be found in the surrounding forest. Although the taste wasn't that pleasant, the smell of the mountain assaulted her senses. While eating, little Linger looked at Nangongzhi's busy figure and asked Mashiro, "Why is brother Nangong still working? Did he eat breakfast?" Hearing little Linger's question, Mashiro's face carried a trace of anger. She glanced at Nangongzhi and said to little Linger, "You don't know, this morning before you woke up, your brother Nangong's gluttonous illness acted up. He directly shook me awake and insisted on having some mountain delicacies. Once this guy started to be gluttonous, there was no limit. He actually acted cute and pestered me. I really couldn't win against him, so I could only find some mushrooms and wild herbs to make breakfast. Perhaps to make up for his loss of composure this morning, he is currently packing our luggage. Although Zhenbai's tone was full of complaints, Ling Er didn't feel that Zhenbai was truly angry. Instead, she quietly moved her little mouth close to Zhenbai's ear and used a voice that only the two of them could hear to whisper to Zhenbai, "Sister Mashiro, you are so stubborn. This morning when brother Nangong woke you up, pestered you, and annoyed you, you might have been happy, after being exposed by little Linger, who was younger than her by many years. Even Mashiro couldn't react in time." Her face turned pink. She lightly patted little Linger's head and softly reprimanded little Linger, "What nonsense are you saying? If you continue like this, then go and accompany your brother Nangong to pack our luggage. The two of you can wait for the food to get cold before you eat it." Hearing Mashiro's disguised threat, little Linger quickly shut her mouth. Her cheeks puffed up and she was like a little hamster as she quickly devoured her food. Although Nangongja was also very envious of Mashiro and little Linger being able to enjoy their food, he still happily watched Mashiro and little Linger eating together. Although their age difference wasn't big, little Linger and Mashiro's relationship was as warm as that of a mother and daughter. Breakfast passed in such a noisy manner. Nangongja had just finished packing and received Mashiro's warm wild vegetable and mushroom porridge. At this point, there were almost no common roads. Most of the roads were man-made livestock or small paths that the residents walked on. After walking for half a day in the forest that was filled with shrubs and trees, Nangongja and the other two were still surrounded by green trees. They couldn't tell where they were at all. However, Ling Er, who had lived here since she was a child, clearly knew that she was about to reach her destination. Her originally heavy footsteps had unknowingly become light and graceful. Her footsteps were like a joyful jump. Little Linger directly overtook Nangongja, who was leading the way, and walked forward. However, Nangongja frowned slightly because Nangongja could vaguely feel the excessive moisture in the soil and air. There were also some remnants of chakra. After careful observation, Nangongja discovered that this chakra was different from normal chakra. It was filled with a primitive and violent aura. If he had to find an analogy, Nangongja felt that only a chibi and nine tails chakra aura was similar to this aura. Was it a tailed beast? Nangongja sensed something and quickly increased his speed. He pulled Mashiro and dashed towards the direction little Linger was heading. Although Mashiro did not know why Nangongja was suddenly so anxious, he still followed Nangongja's pull and dashed towards little Linger's direction. Soon, Nangongja and Mashiro left the dense forest. Bright sunlight and a wide space appeared in front of them. However, little Linger was standing on top of a mound without saying a word. Even if she sensed Nangongja and Mashiro's arrival, she did not react at all. Because of the mound, Nangongja did not know what was in front of him. Thus, he let go of Mashiro's hand and walked forward to stand on top of the mound where little Linger was. Looking around, the originally peaceful little village was no longer the same as Nangongja remembered. One by one, the wooden houses had already collapsed, and there were still huge holes in them. Although it seemed that a certain amount of rescue had been carried out, some of the puddles were still a little red with blood. Looking at little Linger beside him, little Linger's face was so dull, but drops of tears kept overflowing from little Linger's eyes. Nangongja looked at little Linger. His heart was also very sad. He stretched out his hand and hugged little Linger in his arms, slowly stroking little Linger's back with his hand. "No. It's gone, everything is gone." "Why?" "Obviously, this place is so remote that it's meaningless to any country or village, but it's still invaded." "Why? Why? Why?" In Nangongja's embrace, the grief that Ling had been suppressing all this while was completely unleashed. The mournful screams were like a sharp knife piercing Nangong's heart. When did little Linger become like this? No matter who it is, he must make them pay with blood. Nangongja quietly made such a vow in his heart. Chapter 338. While hugging little Linger, Nangongja suddenly noticed a little movement in the forest on his left. After nodding to little Linger and Mashiro behind him, Nangongja let go of little Linger in his arms. The power under his feet instantly erupted, and his whole body was like a huge bird flying through the sky, rushing straight into the forest. After entering the forest, the obvious man-made traces on the ground became more and more conspicuous. However, Nangongja still had some doubts in his heart, because according to the usual behavior of a ninja, in such a place where there were no obvious paths and trees, one would generally rely on one's physical advantage and a certain amount of chakra's assistance to move between the branches. But now, Nangongja could see that most of the traces were on the ground, and they were very obvious. Obviously, they weren't covered up properly. This kind of trace didn't seem like the quality of a ninja, and it was very likely that it was left behind by an ordinary person. But considering the miserable situation of the village and the aura of the tailed beast, Nangongja felt that he shouldn't let down his guard, so he also took out the Heaven's Disaster Sword and its scabbard, and slowed down his speed. While slowly moving forward, Nangongja's hand that was holding the Heaven's Disaster Sword's hilt also slowly became tighter and tighter. Suddenly, Nangongja suddenly pulled out his sword. The Heaven's Disaster Sword didn't leave its scabbard, but directly slashed towards a big tree behind Nangongja. After a moment, the big tree fell down, and Nangongja's figure was already standing behind the fallen tree. A man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s, wearing rough clothes, was sitting on the ground, paralyzed with fear. Although Nangongja's Heaven's Disaster Sword was wrapped in the scabbard, it was pointed directly at the man's throat. On the man's body, the hair on his body stood up. Obviously, even if the Heaven's Disaster Sword was dormant in the scabbard, it was still dangerous for Nangongja. The man's eyes stared straight at the Heaven's Disaster Sword in Nangongja's hand, and his eyes were a little numb. It was a kind of numbness that was filled with fear. The man's body was slightly trembling, and his mouth was muttering something. Nangongja tried his best to listen carefully. Finally, he heard what the man was saying. "Don't kill me. Monster. Monster, don't hurt my family. I'll kill you. Fight. Girl. What's wrong with you? Don't scare father, open your eyes, don't fall asleep. My home. It's gone. It's gone." Gradually, the man who was still staring blankly at Nangongja's scabbard held his head tightly, and the murmuring voice turned into a heart-wrenching roar. The kind of man who lost everything he cherished, who clearly hoped that he could accompany his everything to disappear, was lucky and unlucky to continue living in this world. Poor man, different from before, Nangongja's heart quietly began to breed a kind of emotion called pity. Didn't he also lose everything he was familiar with? Although he was still young at that time, and might not have felt such strong emotions, he would have been driven by the strong desire for revenge in his heart. If he wasn't careful, he might have walked on a path of self-destruction. In that case, wasn't the seal that was engraved on his body a good way to maintain his original heart? Nangongja was actually very satisfied with the days he was living with his sister Nangong-ro, Mashiro, and little Linger. The extreme emotions that he originally had because he was deceived and coaxed had already disappeared for the current Nangongja. Therefore, Nangongja was filled with sympathy for this man who had a similar experience as him and had already embarked on the path of self-destruction. Instead of letting him torture himself in the human world, Nangongja didn't mind offering his pity to this man. "Brother Nangong." Wait. Just as Nangongja unsheathed the calamity sword in his hand, little Linger's voice sounded behind Nangongja. Obviously, she couldn't wait for Nangongja to return, so she brought Mashiro here. Little Linger. Seeing little Linger walking over, Nangong's eyebrows slightly knitted together. Because Nangongja didn't want Little Linger to see him killing people, he said to Little Linger in a serious tone, "Bring your sister Mashiro to the side first, I'll be done soon." After saying that, she looked at the pitiful and pathetic man who was immersed in his own world with a sharp gaze. "Brother, what I mean is that I might be able to get some useful information from him. He's a neighbor who often helped me and my grandfather when I was young." After this, Little Ling Er's eyes were filled with determination and sadness. "After this, I hope that big brother will be able to stop him from living such a painful life." Hearing Little Linger's words, Nangongja finally looked at the child he watched grow up. Unknowingly, Little Linger was no longer the little girl who only knew how to act coquettishly. Instead, she was a mature person who could make her own decisions. He nodded and made room for Little Linger. Little Linger walked to the man's side and slowly squatted down so that she could be at the same level as the man. Little Linger tried to make her voice as soft as possible, and at the same time, she used some of the illusion principles she learned in the ninja school. Finally, she opened her mouth. "Uncle. Uncle. I know that you're very sad right now, but you can't immerse yourself in sadness like this, right?" Little Linger's voice sounded very ethereal, as if it came from the end of the sky. However, after listening carefully, it sounded like she was whispering in his ear. It was this extremely conflicting feeling that made the man whose thoughts were in a mess. At this moment, a trace of clarity appeared in his eyes. Chapter 339. I shouldn't be sad. The man muttered to himself, "No. My family, my home, was destroyed. Why shouldn't I be sad? My home. My daughter. No, no, no." Although it didn't achieve the desired effect, there was no doubt that Ling Er's words had actually torn a small crack in this man's heart. As long as they used the right method to guide him, it wasn't impossible to make this somewhat crazy man reveal the information they needed. Looking at Little Linger, who was calmly observing the man's expression and reaction, Nangongja suddenly had a small plan for Little Linger's future. However, now wasn't the time to think about this. The most important thing now was to obtain some useful information from this crazy man. "Yes, of course you can be sad. Because you've already lost everything that you cherish. But is grief enough for you? Whether it's the death of your family or the destruction of your home, it wasn't because of you. It was because of something else, wasn't it? Are you really willing to let something like that go to another place and let others suffer the same pain as you? I know you're a kind person, but do you really want others to suffer the same fate as you, to have their families torn apart and their families destroyed?" Following the man's words, Little Linger began to guide the man with her chakra-enhanced voice. She hoped that the man could recall the scene at that time. Even if it was just a few words, it could at least provide clues for Nangongja. I don't want to. This kind of suffering, this kind of sadness shouldn't exist in this world. Ugh. Ah. While speaking, the man suddenly grabbed his head with a pained expression. It was obvious that he was recalling the scene in front of his eyes when he was in the most pain. "Don't panic, you are safe now. That monster has already left you. Now, he is an illusion. You just need to tell me, what did you see?" Little Linger signaled Nangongja with her eyes. Nangongja slowly walked behind the man and pointed his index finger at the back of the man's head. He tried his best to make his internal energy gentle and infused it into the man's body, hoping that the man wouldn't fall into the fear in his heart. That's a huge monster. It's covered in spikes and looked very scary. But this monster seems to be afraid of something, and it's running away in a certain direction in terror. Perhaps it was because of the internal energy, or perhaps it was because of Little Linger's guidance. Although the man's body was still trembling slightly, he was able to speak clearly. "What are the characteristics of this monster have?" Imitating the way Little Linger guided the man, Nangongja also tried his best to make his voice as soft as possible, and used his internal energy to simulate little Linger's voice. Seeing how easily Nangongja did it, little Linger wasn't too excited, because these things were actually written in the ninja school textbooks. If it wasn't for the fact that this man knew her and had a relatively good relationship with her, and that this man was mentally exhausted and broken due to excessive grief, this little trick definitely wouldn't have had such an outstanding effect. It looks like a huge tortoise. But it has 3 tails that are obviously different from a tortoise, and its shell also has many spikes. Tortoise, 3 tails. Among the bijou, only one has such characteristics, and that is the Sanbai Isabu that once belonged to the Mist Village. This bijou was originally used by the Mist as a means to deal with the wood leaf, and it was sealed in the body of Kakashi's teammate, Watergate's disciple, Noera Rin. In order to prevent Rin, who didn't have the qualifications to become a Jinchuriki and couldn't suppress the bijou in her body from being expelled to Konoha's territory, Hatake Kakashi personally used his own unique ninjutsu to kill his own teammate. Tailed beasts were creatures that could only be sealed, not destroyed. Although the Sanbai shared some of the effects of Harano Rin's death because it was sealed inside her body, it was still resurrected over the years and became the only wild-tailed beast known to exist. In the information from the Blood Cloak Pavilion, the information about the Sanbai ended here. Combined with some of the things that Kakashi said to him, Nangongja can probably determine that the Sanbai has indeed been successfully resurrected. But this place is indeed very far from the place where Kakashi killed Rin. According to some records, the Sanbai Isabu is not so willing to leave the place where it was born. You just said, this monster doesn't look like it's here to wreak havoc, but it's running away? As if he grasped the key of the problem, Nangongja continued to ask the man again. The man nodded a little woodenly, and then said, this monster is indeed running away, the scene is exactly the same as when I was hunting prey. Did you see clearly what the person who was chasing the monster looked like? Nangongja nodded, slightly confirming his inner judgment, and then asked. He was just floating in the air. With just a wave of his hand, the huge monster was sent flying. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he had very conspicuous hair, and he seemed to be wearing black with red patterns, black. While talking, the man's eyes suddenly began to spin rapidly, and his heartbeat became very fast. In just a moment, the man had already fainted. It seems that his emotions were forcibly suppressed, causing his body to be unable to withstand such emotional suppression and self-protection. Looking at the man's situation, Nangongja also quickly said his judgment. Little Linger nodded, naturally knowing that Nangongja was telling the truth. With a little sadness in her eyes, as well as suppressed anger, Little Linger slowly stepped back. When Mashiro saw Little Linger coming over, he immediately took Little Linger's hand and walked to the other side, obviously wanting to counsel Little Linger. Nangongja naturally slowly unsheathed the tribulation sword in his hand again. Chapter 340. When Nangongja once again stood in front of Little Linger and Mashiro, although there was no blood on his sword, there was still a very faint smell of blood. At the foot of Nangongja's shoes, there was some exceptionally moist soil that clearly wasn't from the surface. With a slightly inquiring gaze, Mashiro secretly glanced at Nangongja. Nangongja nodded towards Mashiro, obviously telling Mashiro that he had already dealt with the pitiful man. Looking at Little Linger, who was being gently hugged by Mashiro, although she was no longer crying, her shoulders were still trembling. It was obvious that her emotions weren't that stable. Nangongja helplessly shook his head. After all, these matters had to be resolved by one's own heart first. No matter how much others said, it wasn't as useful as thinking clearly on one's own. Who is he? Little Linger struggled out of Mashiro's embrace. Although she was slightly shorter than Nangongja, she still raised her head and looked straight into Nangongja's eyes. Her eyes were slightly red and swollen. It was obvious that Little Linger must have cried just now. However, Nangongja saw an extremely dense anger and unwillingness in those red and swollen eyes. Nan Gongzhi didn't wish to see such emotions in little Linger's eyes. He had also been affected by such emotions before, so he was very clear about how dangerous such emotions were. Even if I tell you, what can you do? Walk in front of this person and offer up your life without any resistance. This was the first time Nan Gongzhi used such a tone towards little Linger. Usually, Nan Gongzhi could be said to be extremely doting towards little Linger. Sometimes, even Nan Gongro would ask Nan Gongzhi with a sour tone who he treated as his sister. However, now that Nan Gongzhi directly said such harsh words to little Linger, it made little Linger unable to react for a moment. Even if the price is my life, I will avenge my hometown. Although little Linger was surprised, she still looked at Nan Gongzhi stubbornly and said such words. Nan Gongzhi's heart was suddenly filled with a kind of anger, and the blood in his veins flowed faster. Little Linger. No, Nan Gongling. Do you think that your life is something that you can give up so easily? Nan Gongzhi took a small step forward, and the pressure that was hidden in his body was instantly released. Little Linger had seen Nan Gongzhi release his pressure to others more than once, but this was the first time she personally felt the full pressure from Nan Gongzhi. Although Mashiro, who was standing at the side, was not the main target of Nan Gongzhi's pressure, he was also affected to a certain extent. Mashiro, who did not have any cultivation, reacted even worse than little Linger. Her face became pale, and her eyes were somewhat unfocused. Her legs were also slightly trembling. Little Linger also did not feel good at this moment. In her eyes, Nan Gongzhi was no longer the brother Nan Gong who usually smiled gently at her. Instead, he was an executioner who emitted a thick and difficult to disperse smell of blood. Could this be the true attitude of her brother Nan Gong? For the first time, little Linger understood that Nan Gongzhi's title of Yama was not given to her for no reason. Knowing that little Linger and Mashiro were affected by his pressure, Nan Gongzhi felt that it was about time to release his killing intent and evil aura back into his body. Little Linger. Is death really as fearless as you said? Nan Gongzhi walked to little Linger's side and placed his hand on little Linger's shoulder. He looked straight into little Linger's eyes and said, although I have experienced many life and death situations and have taken many lives, I have never dared to look down on anyone's life. This is because I know that I am also afraid of death. Death has always been a problem that humans have always tried to avoid. Many people say that they are not afraid of death. For their own ideals, for their own perseverance, they are willing to die. However, when death really came to a person, that kind of instinctive fear was something that couldn't be resisted at all. The reason why I am so angry this time is not because you are obsessed with seeking justice for the destruction of your hometown. It is because you view your life so lowly. You have never been alone. You have me, your sister Rower, and your sister Mashiro by your side. We have always been concerned about you. If you were to throw away your life so easily, have you thought about how much pain we would feel in our hearts? Indeed, you have grown up and have a certain level of judgment and execution. However, the relationship between people wasn't something that one could have a deeper understanding of just by age alone. This time, my actions were a little rough, but I hope you can understand that since I have already seen you as a mature person, then in the future, I will not give you endless tolerance. Instead, I will reprimand you should accept it. After speaking, Nan Gongzhi directly walked past little Linger's figure and headed towards the ruined village. Mashiro also seemed to have recovered from Nan Gongzhi's rough coercion. She slowly walked to little Linger's side and placed her hand on little Linger's head. Then, she slowly embraced little Linger. Little Linger, Miyagi's words were indeed a little overboard. However, I think that with your intelligence, you should understand, right? If it wasn't for Miyagi treating you as a family member and wanting you to grow up, he would definitely not show such an abnormal emotion, right? Mashiro and little Linger had lived together with Nan Gongzhi for so many years. Naturally, they understood that Nan Gongzhi was usually a slightly dull and even somewhat taciturn person. However, this time, Nan Gongzhi showed such a rare anger. This was enough to prove that little Linger occupied an important position in Nangong's heart. Let's not talk about how Mashiro comforted little Linger. At this moment, Nangongja had already arrived at the ruined village. Although there was only a faint trace of chakra in the air, Nangongja could still find some traces left behind by the use of ninjutsu. There were pools of water, ice shards in the corners of houses, and traces of sharp objects on the trees and houses. These were all important evidence for Nangongja to judge the participants. Chapter 341. Although Nangongja didn't agree to let little Linger seek revenge, but Nangongja was still very grateful to Wang for saving his life. This village was the former residence of Wang, and also the place where his bones were buried. The purpose of the three of them coming here was to pay respects to Wang, but now, they couldn't even find Wang's grave. Nangongja was also very angry and very sad. So this kind of thing must not be ignored so easily. Judging from the traces on the ground, the ninjutsu used by the two sides should include ice, water, and wind attributes, these three types of chakra. But these three types of attributes didn't bring about the effect of floating in the air like the crazy uncle said. From the information Nangongja once read, Isabu was a tailed beast with these three types of attributes. So, can we assume that the person who forced Isabu to flee for his life didn't use any of these three types of attributes? Many people say that tailed beasts are actually monsters created by the self-consciousness of chakra, although there is no evidence to prove this point, but at least it shows that the use and control of chakra is much better than the average ninja. Relying on the attributes of a tailed beast to attack a tailed beast, how can such behavior be realized? And wearing black clothes with red lines on it, according to Nangongja's knowledge, in the entire ninja world, I am afraid that only the Akatsuki which has conflicts with him and also cooperates with him, and even the Akatsuki which he planted a nail in his back. Fighting against a tailed beast alone, and even having the upper hand, such a person must be extremely famous in the ninja world, and only the Akatsuki can do such a thing and hide such a strong person quietly, without anyone knowing. Taking out a scroll from his arms, he directly tore it open. After a cloud of smoke rose, a black crow has already appeared on Nangongja's shoulder. After Nangongja whispered a few words to the crow on his shoulder, the crow directly turned into pieces of black feathers and disappeared without a trace. Seeing that the crow has disappeared, Nangongja also nodded and returned to little Linger and Mashiro's side. Brother Nangong. I was wrong, no matter what, I shouldn't take my life so lightly. But those people who have lived with me for many years, and the place where my grandfather rested, all of them were destroyed because of the so-called monster and the god-like man floating in the air. I really can't bear this. After saying that, little Linger also showed her strong unwillingness. Nangongja naturally knew what kind of temperament little Linger has. Perhaps after being persuaded by Mashiro for so long, she indeed gave up the impulsive plan of going alone to seek revenge, but she will absolutely not give up on seeking revenge. Well, you don't have to worry about these things, I have my own plans, I will certainly not let those unscrupulous people be so free. Even if there is no way to directly kill them, at least there is no problem in causing trouble for them. Nangongja knew that he was going to face the Akatsuki. Although his strength has also reached the Kage level in the ninja world, but the people of Akatsuki also have their own unique skills, and their advantages are not inferior to the Kage level powerhouses. Of course, he can't just foolishly run up to them, so it seems that the only thing he can do is to cause trouble for them. Previously, the disciple of the blood cloth pavilion who came here to remove the grave wrote the location of the grave in the report. It is a little far from the location of this village. If we are lucky enough, the grave of Wang should be fine. Let's first go to the grave of Wang, and then see how to take revenge for the people in this village, okay? When Nangongja said that Wang's grave may be fine, little Linger's eyes began to shine. Her grandfather's rest has not been disturbed yet. Little Linger's heart at the moment was filled with joy like wild grass. Obviously she hoped that Nangongja can take her to see Wang's grave. Walking to the side of Little Linger, Nangongja gently took Little Linger's hand, and slowly walked with Little Linger in a direction. Mashiro naturally followed behind Little Linger and Nangongja, and with a little doubt he looked at Nangongja, who was leading the way for Little Linger. Mashiro also participated in the management of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, and it happened that the report about a Wang's grave was actually from Mashiro's hands. Mashiro still had some vague impression about the records, although he didn't remember where a Wang's grave was, but he was sure that a Wang's grave was not in the direction where Nangongja took Little Linger. After walking for a while, whether it was the strong smell of blood or the scene of destruction in the village, they all disappeared without a trace, and it became the same as the forest they had been passing through, ordinary and without any special characteristics. A tombstone carved out of bluestone appeared in front of Nangongja and Little Linger. On the tombstone was written, Wang's grave, which was obviously a grave for a Wang who had never revealed his true name. Little Linger burst into tears the moment she saw Wang's tombstone. She hugged a Wang's grave and cried non-stop while talking about her experiences over the years, repeatedly expressing her self-blame for not coming back to see a Wang. However, Mashiro quietly pulled Nangongja to the side and pointed at the grave that Nangongja called a Wang's grave. This isn't a Wang's real grave, right? What did you do? Nangongja pressed his index finger on Mashiro's lips, hinting Mashiro not to disturb Little Linger. He then lowered his voice and said to Mashiro, no matter if it's the tombstone or the coffin, they all belong to a Wang. I also read the report about a Wang's grave. After confirming some things, I directly went to a Wang's grave and found that it was also affected and very miserable. Therefore, I immediately brought a Wang's coffin out and brought this tombstone here to be buried. It took me a lot of time to arrange such an old scene. After listening to Nangongja's words, Mashiro naturally understood that Nangongja did this to appease the hatred and anger in Little Linger's heart, which was why he did this extremely disrespectful act. Hopefully, a Wang could also understand Nangongja's painstaking efforts. Chapter 342. In the end, after paying their respects to Ah Wang, Nangongja and the others returned to the wood leaf. However, the three of them couldn't let go of the things that happened in Little Linger's village. Every time they avoided Nangongja and Mashiro, Little Linger would always be in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. As for Nangongja, although he repeatedly said that he would take action, he didn't do anything at all. Little Linger naturally believed that Nangongja would do what he said, but believing was one thing. Nangongja's repeated delays made Little Linger understand the difficulty and seriousness of this matter. After returning to the wood leaf, Little Linger also immersed herself in the public library of the wood leaf to read a lot of information. She could also determine that the monster that escaped from the mouth of the somewhat crazy uncle was one of the 9-tailed beasts, Isabu. How could a person who could chase a tailed beast away be someone that could be easily dealt with? Little Linger even ran to Nangongja's side and told Nangongja that he didn't need Nangongja to seek revenge. However, Nangongja just smiled and shook his head without saying anything. Nangongja's stubbornness, or rather stubbornness, was something that Ling naturally knew very well. In order for Nangongja to avenge those who had already died and weren't close to her, she felt that it wasn't worth it to risk her brother's life. However, Nangongja seemed to be stubborn. He didn't even consider giving up. She didn't know if it was purely because of the destruction of the village or if there were other deeper reasons. In the middle of the night, the bright moon hid its appearance in the dark clouds. The originally cold moonlight was completely hidden at this moment. Nangongja, on the other hand, was neatly dressed and walked towards the forest outside Konoha. Although there was a barrier around the wood leaf, it was only designed to prevent ninjas from reaching Kage tier. At Nangongja's level, he could completely hide his whereabouts at specific nodes and not be discovered by the barrier. Nangongja was surrounded by tall trees. Because it was late at night, whether it was insects or birds, they seemed to have fallen asleep at this moment. The surroundings were silent. Nangongzhi could clearly hear his own breathing and heartbeat in his ears. Suddenly, a crow appeared on a big tree. The crow was very ordinary, its feathers didn't reflect light, but its eyes were very unusual. This was because it had a pair of 3 tomo sharingan. Caw. 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 When the crow saw Nangongzhi, it made a very strange sound. Nangongzhi also nodded his head, as if to tell the crow that the surroundings were safe. The crow's eyes turned in a circle, then it directly spread its wings and flew down from the branch. Like sand being swept away by a gust of wind, the crow turned into a clump of feathers that far exceeded its original size. The feathers gathered in front of Nangongzhi, and slowly a human figure was piled up by the feathers. When the feathers scattered, a person wearing the Akatsuki's black robe with red clouds and 3 tomo in his eyes appeared in front of Nangongzhi. These years, Itachi had been in the Akatsuki organization. As the Akatsuki organization's multifaceted spy to Woodleaf's relationship to Akatsuki organization, and Nangongzhi's relationship to Akatsuki organization, the huge pressure seemed to make Itachi's appearance more weary. Don't know whether it was an illusion or not, but Nangongzhi always felt that Itachi's eyes were not so bright, as if he was extremely tired. Now is the time of trouble. You suddenly came to find me. I hope you are not looking for something boring. Itachi's tone was somewhat cold, but Nangongzhi was very clear about Itachi's situation. In the Akatsuki organization, there was a certain amount of suspicion towards Itachi. For a long time, the Akatsuki organization used Itachi as a knife in their hand, and didn't let him come in contact with any of the Akatsuki organization's confidential information. Even if he accidentally learned some things, most of them were some unimportant or vague information. The Akatsuki organization also sent a lot of diversion to Woodleaf through Itachi more than once. Although it was true, it was not so important information. At the moment, Woodleaf was under the rule of the 4th Hokage, Watergate. The Akatsuki organization was the organization that once hurt Watergate's wife and children. Even before, in order to find information about the Akatsuki organization, Watergate even abandoned his responsibility as Hokage and directly ran to the ninja world to investigate for a period of time. It's conceivable that when Watergate knew that Woodleaf actually placed his own nail in this organization, how anxious Watergate's heart will be, and how great the pressure on Itachi will become. Danzo has been expelled. Seeing Itachi, Nangongzhi didn't talk about himself first. Instead, he talked about the common enemy he had to face when he and Itachi reached an alliance. Your parents are safe now, and Sasuke has also left Woodleaf's range. Although you are now in Orochimaru's base, but considering your restraint on Orochimaru, it's easy to take Sasuke away. Don't you want to take your parents and brother away from the world and live a quiet life? At this moment, Itachi's face was still cold. That kind of cold temperament seemed to accompany Itachi since he was born. But Nangongzhi could clearly see the very obvious fluctuations in Itachi's eyes. For Nangongzhi's words, Itachi himself was actually moved. But soon, Itachi adjusted his mentality. After so many years of spy life, if there is really any significant growth in Itachi, I'm afraid it's only the effect of hiding his true feelings. I still can't do this. Itachi lightly shot a glance at Nangongzhi, as if he was looking at the devil in his heart, with both fear and a little bit of uncontrollable desire. If this matter could be solved like this before I joined Akatsuki, I would definitely abandon everything and live together with my family. But you have read some of the information I gave you. Akatsuki is not just an organization that wants to be the first mercenary organization in the ninja world. Although their conspiracy is hidden from me, I can still know that this is a terrible move that affects the ninja world and even the whole world. Before becoming Itachi Uchiha, I was a Woodleaf ninja. Even if there is a crack on my forehead, I am still a Woodleaf ninja, Itachi Uchiha. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.